We're live.
We're live. I think we need to move this way.
Yes.
We're
always trying to figure that out because remember, we're round now.
Well, now we're in the round, and because we both use this independently.
Yes,
hello, all. Welcome. It is Thursday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and I noticed when I was coming in this evening that it said Jen Perelman. Did you record something, or were you on something?
Yeah, I was on with Jamarl Thomas this morning.
Ah, becoming a regular of sorts, I see.
You know, he and I like to chat. He's like to chat. Yeah. So that's always fun. And so that is also why the studio was sort of disheveled.
I didn't realize it was disheveled.
Not disheveled. Okay, out of sorts.
Out of sorts. Well, the whole world's out of sorts right now. It's really great.
No.
We love the chaos.
No, we are in such a shit show.
Holly Horn saw you this morning. So yeah. No, we've got a lot of ground to cover.
That's cool because I can't see the chat on him when I'm on the guest end. I don't, for some reason, I didn't see it on his because he records.
Oh.
I don't think I was live.
Oh. Well, no.
Maybe I was live.
No, you probably were and just didn't realize it, or maybe it was on delay.
I might not have
Anything's
realized
possible. But as we've often said, we have to cross-collaborate with people who are on a similar mission.
Yes.
And the person who is our special guest this evening is definitely on a similar mission. We have often said that it doesn't matter if you're trying to play the two-party politic game. What matters is whether or not you're on the mission that we're on, which is to try to turn politics into service. And the only, I would say, facet of our broken economic and political system that could even attempt to do that right now as we continue to sink as a empire is the labor movement. And the gentleman who's coming in is a guest who we're very fond of, who comes from the only state in the history of the country that ever voted for a socialist for president. That, of course, is a state that also believes
you're getting like your total trivia dork.
Of course I am. Of course I am. Because he's a real journalist, and we don't have too many of them anymore. Do we, ladies and gentlemen?
No, we don't. Guys, it's always nice when we get to talk to an author and an actual journalist. It's exciting.
John Nichols of the Nation, welcome back to Generational Change.
You're being too kind to me, but what an honor to be with you. And you are absolutely right, Peter. Wisconsin voted in 1924, 100 years ago last week, for Robert M. La Follette, who was running as an independent progressive endorsed by the Socialist Party and endorsed warmly by Eugene Victor Debs in a campaign that tried to save America from itself. Unfortunately, only Wisconsin had the wisdom to support it. And we instead got Calvin Coolidge, who laid the groundwork for Herbert Hoover to lead us into a Great Depression, and the rest was history. But it's in Wisconsin. Our official slogan is "We told you so," and we did.
Yeah. I mean, I've always found that there's a certain amount of very independent, libertarian-minded people in Wisconsin. I think it's a good representation, and in a way, but yet it's its whole own thing.
It's its whole own thing, and sometimes it doesn't turn out well. I mean, I'm the ultimate Wisconsin defender, right? I am, sixth generation. We're coming up on the 200th anniversary of my family in this state.
Wow.
And so I'm, ridiculously loyal of it. My mother, who's still around and has lived half of that time, and she's 93. She's the daughter of one of La Follette's campaign aides back from 1924. And so,
Wow.
I should say granddaughter. Her mom was a little bit, she was around and present. Her grandfather actually was the activist. But the fact is that this sort of runs deep in me. And I love to talk about the good side of it, but I do have to always remind people that we did send Joe McCarthy to the U.S. Senate as well. So we've screwed up now and again. But not as much as Florida, by the way.
Oh,
yeah.
please.
You're not going to compare to Florida.
Please. But you know what, though? Here's why, in all fairness to Florida, and I'm a second generation native Floridian. My dad was actually born in Miami. There are not many of us.
Now, can I interrupt you and just say
that
being a second generation Floridian would be like being an eighth generation Wisconsinite.
Okay, right. So it is. People don't realize that. Like, no, my dad was born in Miami in 46. Like, people don't realize that's a long time ago. And when I was growing up, it wasn't like it is now, but because it is such a place where people come to, I mean, we get like 1,000 people a day or something are relocating here. It's not good for a lot of reasons, tax reasons, weather, whatever. And so because our state is now so transient, we're a mess.
Can I tell you something? I'll give you a good Florida story for what it's worth. And there's a lot of them. Florida has incredible history. But one of my favorite ones as regards labor and progressive issues is that way back 80 years ago, Florida was sending Claude Pepper to the U.S. Senate as a progressive.
I know who he was. He's a legend down here. And he was like, my bubby loved him. Like, he was a legend with the old people.
Well, your bubby was right. And probably when your bubby was old, Claude Pepper was already old. But he was in the Senate in 1944, and he participated in one of the most remarkable, he was a real progressive, not perfect on everything, but way ahead of the curve as regards what was still a Southern state. And in 1944 at the Democratic National Convention, when they forced Henry Wallace out as the Democratic nominee for vice president, and Wallace would have succeeded Roosevelt and become president as a committed supporter of racial justice, who wanted to end segregation, a committed supporter of women's rights, who wanted to make sure that the women who had gone into the factories during World War II were not, oppressed in the post-war era, who wanted to try and find peace on the global stage in the post-war era. And maybe he was wrong on some elements of it, but he was generally right in his vision that we ought to put diplomacy ahead of a renewal of incredible military spending and what became the Cold War. Henry Wallace came within a sliver of being renominated. The bosses wanted to stop him. The segregationists were desperate to stop him. And at the last minute, there was a moment when the crowd was crying out to renominate Wallace. And it looked like there was a real chance it was going to happen. And Claude Pepper, from the Florida delegation, tried to storm the stage of the convention, tried to run up the steps to the stage of the convention so that he could grab the microphone and call for the renomination of Henry Wallace by acclamation, right? To just go for it and renominate the Roosevelt Wallace ticket. He was blocked as he went up, literally by machine thugs and stuff. It was a kind of a struggle to get to the microphone. And moments before, like seconds before he got to the microphone, the chair of the convention gavelled the convention closed, even though the crowd screamed to keep it open. But he gavelled it closed. Overnight, they restructured the seating, restructured the tickets, gave out bribes like you wouldn't believe, and blocked Wallace from getting the nomination. And it is an absolute truism of history that if Claude Pepper had been a little bit bigger, and he was a kind of a little guy, if he'd been a little bit bigger and pushed a little bit harder, we might have had a dramatically different history in the United States.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's almost the scene where I'm sure you've seen Oliver Stone's the series. It basically starts with that primary and what happened in that primary.
Yep.
And that's where the timeline got skewed. Like if we could go back to the future and you went back and changed that,
yep.
like what would that timeline be if you didn't have Truman, right? And we had Wallace instead, like everything would be completely different.
And in fact, here's the thing. There are many people. Wallace was very much on the left, so much on the left that he was often called a communist. In fact, he was quite a capitalist. But he did work with the communists, and that got him a really bad reputation with a lot of people politically. And, we should acknowledge that up front because it's one of the things that made it tough for Wallace historically. But the one thing that I will tell you is I think likely he would have carried on with Roosevelt's foreign policy. And so as a result, it would have been, more of a mix than what you saw under Truman. But we can put that aside for a moment and just say that on domestic policy, his absolute commitment to end racial segregation, to end Jim Crow, would have been a brutal battle politically, but it had the potential to transform America 20 years before the Civil Rights Act, 20 years before the Voting Rights Act, and imagine that, to give people 20 years of freedom that they didn't get. I mean, think about that's where history is valuable, because it reminds us that in moments where we think, well, that's just the way it went and stuff like that, we should never be so casual. We should never lose sight of the fact that there, but for a historical moment going a little bit different, we might live in a very different and better world. And I made Wallace a centerpiece of my book, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. And one of the arguments I made, which I know you two will appreciate throughout that book, was that every time in the last 80 years, when progressives have gotten close to having control of the Democratic Party, having the dominant place in the party, the establishment has rallied with everything it had to push back against that. And I would say it wasn't only in 1944 that a huge portion of the future was stolen from us by big money, establishment insiders, political forces that frankly wanted to use the Democratic Party as really a roadblock to the progress that people were demanding. And I think it continues to be an ongoing reality, not one that makes me tell people to leave the Democratic Party. I mean, people can do what they want. If they want to do third party, I think I understand that and respect that. I wish we had a multi-party democracy. If they want to stay in the Democratic Party, that's cool too, if you want to fight there. But the one thing I always tell people is, if you're going to fight within the Democratic Party, what you desperately need to understand is that you are fighting against organized forces that work full-time, permanently, to make sure that the Democratic Party doesn't change. And so progressives, if they're going to be working in the Democratic Party, have to understand that they are working against that.
John, I think that is a fantastic transition to a clip from CNN earlier today, which you probably have seen already. I don't think Jen really wants to see this.
Don't like to sully myself with mainstream media. I don't like to sully myself with mainstream media. That stuff can rub off on me.
We've said many times before that if there is a person who is emblematic of what is wrong with the Democratic Party, it is Debbie Wasserman Schultz, as the great Bernie Sanders would say. And so, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but she keeps getting invited. You know what I think it is, John? You probably would know this better than we would. But what I think ends up happening is that on the Hill, especially on the third floor rotunda where they get interviewed by, corporate media, that basically they throw it out there to just about everybody. Hey, you want to come on this afternoon? You want to come on this evening? You want to talk? Debbie Wasserman Schultz has never met a camera that she doesn't.
Well, right. I think she's all right. She's
can I just say, she's not alone in that. There is a handful of members of Congress who literally hang around waiting to be there at the moment. And the interesting thing about this is a lot of the people in Congress don't do that, right?
But most don't.
No.
And most Congress people, we don't know who they are.
Out of the 535 federally elected representatives,
we don't know most of them.
How many do you know 30 of them? That's a big number.
It's my job to try and know a few of them. But what I can tell you is this. Let me give you a quick example. John Thune just became the majority leader of the United States Senate. And John Thune is now pretty much the only thing standing between Donald Trump and making, Matt Gaetz and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. members of the cabinet, right? And some of these other nominees. And I don't say that casually. Thune is a right-wing conservative. He's not a great player, but he's had a terrible relationship with Trump for a long time. There's a lot of nuance in there and things that people should know. And yet I would argue right now that most people don't know that.
No.
Yeah.
But we're aware of it to the extent of we knew it could have been Rick Scott.
Who would have been so much worse.
Exactly. So because that's what Peter had said, that he thought that it would be Rick Scott. And so that was my concern. So when I saw that, I'm like, all right, so he's a non-Trump Republican. That's probably a good counterbalance.
Well,
it's
an interesting dynamic because Trump as recently as 2022. And by the way, I don't want to get off your Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but as we deviate here for a moment,
we always like a good distraction from Debbie.
Kind of the dynamics about how Congress is covered. Thune has just been completely uncovered because he comes from South Dakota, and it's just too far to send a camera, I guess. But the thing to understand about John Thune is, as recently as 2022, Trump tried to primary him out of the Senate, backing Kristi Noem. Right. Down, she didn't make the race, and so Thune was reelected. But that's the reality of the relationship. In 2024, Thune actively backed Tim Scott for president. Now, Tim Scott, I'm not here to make the case for Tim Scott or anything like that, but what I'll tell you is Thune chose to go against Trump, even at a point when it was pretty clear Trump was rolling through. The only reason you need to know that is not to love John Thune, not even to be enthusiastic about him, right? But to understand he's the guy we got to pay. That relationship is going to matter a lot one way or the other over the next number of months and years. And our media does not cover politics.
No, well, you're talking about things like nuance and things like the relationship between the majority leader in the Senate and the president and how that could matter. And it's sort of like we need Schoolhouse Rock.
We do.
Yeah, we do, but you want to play your Debbie clip and get it over with, because I don't know how long I'm going to be able to stomach watching her sitting there on the screen.
So for a lot of people that are trying to find a reason not to stay in the Democratic Party, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is daring you to leave the party and never look back.
Don't threaten me with a good time. Let's see it.
First, want to acknowledge is that Democrats absolutely have work to do. We have work to do on making sure that we can communicate our message effectively. By message, I mean the substance of what we've accomplished. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which brought massive reductions in prescription drug prices.
You had to think about those words for a second. They said, what reduction? What was the word again that you gave her? What was that? And keep in mind, she's doing this from her home in Weston. So, there's also that fact.
Which is, of course, fine. But
what's historic?
Can I just jump in here and say,
please.
Sure. They're talking about reducing drug prices, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is a great message. But throughout the whole campaign, I kept saying, if I hear again, that, you should vote for us because we reduced the price of insulin, right, to $35. Which is fantastic, by the way.
I thought Trump did it, though.
No. I give the Democrats for some credit for pushing through, a lot of, but that's not my point. I think that's fantastic. I love that. But why would you mount a campaign where you say, vote for us because we did that, and not mount a campaign that says, if you give us control of the White House and of the House and Senate, we'll do that for every drug, period.
No, because they don't want to.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the problem of the thing. It is like, to run on what you did with the Inflation Reduction Act, to run on infrastructure, which were good things, give them their due, right? But to run on that without coupling it with, and that was, step one on a 10-step ladder, give us the power, we're going all the way up, right? To give people something to vote for. People don't vote on what you did. They vote on what they want.
Exactly. She's so ready to brag about their fierce accomplishments.
Yeah.
All right.
Continue.
Global warming and climate change. We passed the CHIPS Act. We passed the the infrastructure bill. And those all created jobs and contributed toward us are having the most robust economy worldwide post-COVID. But obviously that message didn't get through, and we were not able to acknowledge consistently the pain that voters feel. And I can hear it from people in my district, and I feel it in my own grocery store when I, go and buy my groceries every week, every few days. We were not acknowledging that there are people who are still struggling to make their daily ends meet. But the problem that we've got is that the communications landscape is so diffuse. There are podcasts and YouTube and WhatsApp messaging, and we have to make sure that we're meeting voters where they are, and we didn't really do a consistent job. But this result cannot be overstated. Yes, Trump looks like he's headed to have won all of the battleground states, but at the same time, we won the Senate race in Nevada, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, and likely Arizona. And we are likely, either way, in the House to have the same slim majority, no matter which party ends up. So this was not the wave election that the majority of the media is portraying. Voters had a Trump on the ballot the last 3 elections. We had a very short presidential campaign with our nominee, and there were a lot of other issues as well.
You had over $1 billion.
I mean,
this is a person.
Are we done with her?
I want to be. Can we be done with her?
Fine. We don't have to look at her anymore.
I can't look at her
because
anymore.
honestly,
I don't want to pick on her, except that
It's bad though, right? She's brutal.
Well, I don't want to pick on her per se, except to say that she is, in fact, probably about as close to the center of where the Democratic Party leadership, the establishment, is right now.
Yeah.
As anybody. So she's actually very emblematic of that. And the problem is what she did there was just sort of relitigate the campaign they lost, right? And to say, I guess we should have just said what we were saying during that campaign louder, right? Because that's what they mean when they're saying we're going to meet them where they're at. We're going to use this new crazy social media, and stuff like that. Yeah, that's all true. Totally true. There were actually some of us saying that before the election, right? Not after. And one of the reasons that I wrote in October, after having spent quite a bit of time with Sean Fain, the head of the UAW, that they really needed to shift their messaging as regards working Americans. And they needed to amplify some things that actually have a lot of meaning for people in battleground states, but that they weren't talking enough about. For instance, that Trump as president had restructured NAFTA and made things worse, right? He literally, created a circumstance where we lost huge sections of the auto parts industry. I mean, he was everything that you can legitimately criticize Bill Clinton about for what he did in the 90s, NAFTA, China free trade and stuff like that. Trump had actually, unwittingly, because he doesn't know anything about this stuff, done something worse, right? And the Democrats didn't take that on the trail. They didn't talk about that. And so why I bring that up is because NAFTA in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, that's an issue that every working class person for decades has learned to understand, right? You bring that up, it's a touchstone issue that they can understand well. And if you say, well, here's what Trump did that was really bad about that. And if you actually went to union halls on a regular basis and appeared with Bernie Sanders and Sean Fain, right? Like dare to do that and talk about these issues. Could they have gotten the extra 30,000 votes in Wisconsin? Yes. Could they have gotten the votes they needed in Michigan? Possibly, especially if they had gotten right on Gaza. Could they have gotten the votes they needed in Pennsylvania? Yes. Maybe even some other places. But no, they spent those days, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz is right about this. Very short campaign, 107 days. You got to use every day well. They spent those days when they could have been in union halls, when they could have been appearing with Bernie Sanders and Sean Fain, traveling around with Liz Cheney.
Right.
I mean,
that's a fundamental thing. And that's not what Debbie Wasserman Schultz is saying.
No. But I also think the biggest issue is she's sitting there and saying that the problem is we didn't do a good job of getting our message out. I would suggest that you actually have to have a message.
Yeah,
and that it has to actually have some substance to it. So if you don't have policy, like, you could sit there and criticize Trump, but they don't offer anything. I mean, just saying the slim bit of stuff, the bare minimum that you did is what you think you need to amplify to get voters. then she truly believes that their mission and their platform is just fine. She truly believes that. It's totally good.
She also probably, I would suggest, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but like many Democrats, probably believes that Joe Biden was like the greatest president in history. And I actually came to respect Joe Biden more because of many of the things he did as a president. He went further than I think many people expected him to go. But this is something important to remember. Every one of the bills that she just talked about, that many of the Democrats talk about, every one of the bills that they talked about started at something dramatically bigger and dramatically better.
Right.
The Inflation Reduction Act was like 3 times larger. It was going to, in the Inflation Reduction Act, as it was initially proposed, it was going to address dental, vision, and hearing in Medicare, right? To expand that out, which that alone, I think, actually could have won an election if you actually ran on and won on that. It was going to do all sorts of other things on child poverty. It had all this. It had much, much more to it. They negotiated it down because Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, didn't want something. Same thing with inflation. Same thing with all of them. So everything that Joe Biden did was compromised down, even at a time when they had Democratic majorities. And so this is a deeply problematic thing, because when they had power, they didn't deliver fully. They didn't deliver at the level that might actually have made people recognize that you were doing things. And why didn't that happen? Because there were powerful lobbyists in Washington not working on the Republicans, but working on the Democrats.
Of course.
And this is a Democratic Party that, as an example, had a chance to raise the minimum wage and didn't do it. Right?
The parliamentarian.
And do you think, by the way, that Donald Trump and even John Thune are going to say, oh, the parliamentarian says we can't make Matt Gaetz the attorney general?
I've never heard any president that would bow down to the parliamentarian.
Listen, Matt Gaetz has been a really loyal foot soldier, and if that parliamentarian gets in my way, he's fired.
Well, and totally I will tell you, that was one of the moments in the beginning. That was one of the moments in the beginning where we said Joe's going to be a failure.
100%.
Like if you as the president of the United States do not have the power, just in your person, to be able to get past the parliamentarian, how in the world are you dealing with like world leaders?
And all the rest.
Exactly.
Let me just throw in one more thing on this for what it's worth too. In this exact context, one of the arguments for Joe Biden, and again, I'm not here to beat up Joe Biden. He did better than I thought, right? He stayed around too long. I think that was very problematic. All these other things we talk about. But my point is I hope here a deeper one. And that is, one of the arguments for Joe Biden is that he had spent 36 years in the United States Senate, 8 years as vice president, right? I mean, this is a guy who supposedly was like the Lyndon Johnson of his time, right? He knew how to talk to Capitol Hill to make things happen. Well,
he couldn't exactly.
In fact, what we ended up with was dramatic compromises downward from what he and people like Bernie Sanders, others, said was needed at the time. So now they compromised away huge parts of their initial proposals. And then they say, why don't the people appreciate what they gave them? Well, the fact of the matter is that when they made the initial proposals, they knew what the people needed. And they compromised that down. And so at this point, when they're in there, they say, well, why didn't the people realize how great we were? Right? Well, the fact is, if I say to you, as an example, I know you need to get from, where are you at? Or are you in Miami?
We're outside of Fort Lauderdale.
Okay, you're outside of Fort Lauderdale. You got to get from Fort Lauderdale over to Tampa.
Right.
Right? And that's about, I think it's like 3 hours drive, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how many miles is that? There's a point to this.
150, about
150 miles.
170 maybe.
Okay. So I say to you, I understand you need to get 170 miles. I'm going to give you enough gas to get 50 miles. And you should really like me for doing that.
Because I'm giving you something.
Yeah, but now I'm stuck in, I don't know, Fort Worth or Lake Worth or someplace like that. I don't know Florida well enough. Right. But I didn't get to where I wanted to go, right? I didn't get to where I needed to go. And yeah, I do appreciate the little that you threw in some gas money, but I'm still stuck someplace, right? Not where I needed to go. And to go to the American people and then say, well, you should really be happy that we did all that. No, what you should have said, and this is, we were just talking about Henry Wallace, what a great guy he was. Harry Truman actually did this brilliantly in 1948. He ran against the do-nothing Republican Congress, and he said, I wanted to do these things. They wouldn't let me do them. Give me another term, give me a full term, give me a Congress I can work with, and I will do them, right? And people actually believed him, right? Because he was actually acknowledging reality. Same thing with Franklin Roosevelt when he ran for re-election in 1936. It's not all ancient history here, I promise you. 1936, Franklin Roosevelt runs for re-election. Instead of saying, hey, I just did the New Deal, the biggest social transformation in American history. No, he said, I look at America and I see huge portions of people who are unfed, unclothed, unhoused. And that is morally, I'm paraphrasing here, but that is morally wrong. And so I seek re-election to address those unaddressed issues, right? He acknowledged that he had not succeeded in what he set out to do, that he had not done enough to ease the pain.
Right.
Once that acknowledgement is made, then people think, well, okay, I'm in a conversation with somebody who actually gets something. The Democrats never really did that. They would say,
Ever.
oh, yeah, when I go to the store, it's costly or something like that. But they never acknowledged that they didn't get what they had promised or what they needed. And as a result, I think a lot of people just didn't hear them.
No, I also think that a lot of that just has to do with the infrastructure. The biggest electoral landslide in the history of the United States was FDR's reelection in 1936 because he passed the singular most popular government program that still exists in the United States, and that is Social Security.
Social Security.
So
Yeah.
You're talking about the difference between why do the Democrats not work for the people today versus yesteryear, and that is corporate special interests have completely taken over our government. And I want to transition this into the conversation about Trump. We don't know what his presidency is going to look like. He's too much of a wild card to make any predictions. I think he'll do some good things. I think he'll definitely do some bad things. But if there's one thing that is indisputable, because we know, and I don't want to revert back to Biden. I personally think he was a failure as a president because I think that foreign policy is more important to the chief executive than domestic policy, because that's something that you have a direct effect on. And we could talk about Ukraine and Gaza being the two most obvious examples. But in terms of domestic policy, Biden broke a railroad strike. And to me, that's unforgivable. I will say that we both agree Lena Khan was the best appointment of his entire presidency. It is very likely, much as Reid Hoffman was giving millions upon millions of dollars to Kamala Harris. And of course, Elon Musk has already come out and said Lena Khan has got to go.
Oh, wow.
So as far as I'm concerned, it was very fleeting and enjoyable while it lasted. But at least we got a taste of what possible real recognition against corporate tyranny could actually
And not to interrupt you, but to say also that he gave us an NLRB that was actually vaguely pro-labor.
Correct. I agree.
Right?
And
now, stunningly, we still have a chance to reappoint people and to appoint people in this period to the NLRB and keep it locked in as a pro-labor NLRB during the first couple of years of Trump's administration. But to do that, Biden has to make appointments now in this lame duck period and get the Senate to agree to them. That's what they should be doing. The Senate should be in session 24/7, approving moves to try and make sure that we can lock in things. I mean, Lena Khan, you could appoint Lena Khan again.
Well,
now
they don't want her.
No, but what I'm telling you is this is, and again, I understand the complexities of a Lena Khan appointment. It's a lot more, there are more subtleties and things than we have time to go into. But what I'm saying is that presidents are not elected for 3 years and 10 months.
Correct.
They're elected to 4-year terms. One of my biggest frustrations is in that last period of a presidency, right? Those last couple months.
Yeah.
You have an opportunity to take the mandate that you got and complete it, right? As best you can. You may not succeed in everything, but you can do things. And what is incredible to me is that at this period where, they could address some of these issues and they could approve judges, they could do things. They're like, we'll go into session for like a day or so and then, head back out to whatever. And I think that this communicates to people who are actually concerned about all this stuff a lack of seriousness. That you're not really in this fight in the way that you should be. And people say, well, yeah, but Trump got elected, so you got to just wait till he comes in and let him do his thing. Well, no, Biden got elected and he had a 4-year term. You're supposed to finish that term out and do things with that time. And then one other thing too, I mean, Trump got a mandate. No, it looks like when we get all the West Coast vote, right now he's at 50.1%. Every day it's ticked down, right? I think that reasonably soon he'll be below 50%, which means the majority of the people who cast ballots didn't vote for him, right? It's not going to get down to the point where most people voted for Harris, right? I don't think we're going to get there, but it's going to get a lot closer, and Trump's going to go down. What you can say in that moment is, okay, Donald Trump has been elected. Acknowledge that, and he's been elected with a Republican Senate and the House. He's going to have a lot of power, right? But this isn't some case where the entire American people rose up and said, well, we want to go in a different direction. And so Democrats have plenty of opportunity to try and lock in some of those things, which are actually, but polling says, incredibly popular, like make it a strong ally.
So why don't they? So why don't they do that?
I think there's two things that are really serious about this. Number one, I think it's right where you're going, Peter, which is to the donor class, to money in politics. And to the fact that there's a lot of Democrats who are thinking about, some of them who are leaving power, who are thinking about what they're going to do in their, post-elected career. And then also people are thinking about the next election, who's going to be with them, who's going to back them and stuff like that. And the problem with it is that, as you said a moment ago, the politics is so transformed, right? That I think there are an awfully lot of Democrats who honestly, they like to run against the Republicans. They like to say that they're not as bad as the Republicans. But when it actually comes to hardcore governing, right, to trying to get a few things done, they know that offends and scares much of the donor class. And so I think that it's writ large across this whole period, right? You're telling people that this is the most important election in history, that Donald Trump is an incredibly dangerous man, most dangerous man around, right? And that yet you're sitting with him taking pictures, and as Joe Biden did the other day. And I believe in the peaceful transition of power. I strongly believe in it. And so I respect that Biden met with Trump. I think that's appropriate. But when you come out of that meeting, I think you should have a press conference. You say, look, I met with Trump. We had a nice meeting. But I just want to emphasize, one of the things I told him there is that he shouldn't do this or he should do, you know what I mean? You still maintain the fight, right? You at least try it. And you try to use that period of time you have to do something with it. I think too often the Democrats communicate a lack of seriousness.
Because I honestly don't think people at that level give a shit. I just don't.
I think that some don't. Yeah.
I think that honestly, it would not surprise me if Biden voted for Trump.
Oh,
I think that they care about their stock portfolios. I think they care about their trades. I think they care about fundraising. And I think that I think that the people in the elite class, because at the end of the day, I feel like this is a class war. And I feel like the people that are in that class, they benefit regardless. They benefit more with having Trump there. People like Nancy Pelosi benefit from having Trump there, of course.
But here's why I'll suggest that I'm quite sure Biden didn't vote for Trump. And I'll tell you why. Because a one-term president's legacy is entirely made or lost. Your place in history is very much defined by whether your successor comes in. Ask George H.W. Bush.
Right.
And so I don't think there's any question that Biden and Pelosi and these people wanted Kamala Harris to win. I think they really, really desperately wanted her to win. But that doesn't take away from your point, an element of your broader point, which is that, to my view, there is among a lot of the elite class in our politics a determination not to really change, right? Not to that, and I believe it was Open Secrets. It was Sunshine Foundation. I think they did a wonderful study a few years ago where they looked at the fact that divided government and kind of the governance we've had for the last many years, which is narrowly divided. It may go a little Republican, it may go a little Democrat, but it's kind of like stays in a certain place. And we all are very frustrated because things don't get done, and maybe that even fed into the appeal of Trump, because he said, I'm going to break it all down and do things. But whatever that dynamic is, that there's a lot of frustration with governance. They said in this study, the one group of people that aren't frustrated are the super rich, because they keep getting richer in, like, the status quo is perfect for them. It's not just good, it's perfect. And so, why do they give to both parties? Why do they not care basically who wins, stuff like that?
They don't care.
It's so perfect for them right now. And they just don't want that screwed up. They want to continue that. And why I would tell you is this gets, I think that the lie kind of is exposed, because you have Democrats going out saying this is the most important election in history, right? This is, everything's on the line. It's so absolutely vital. And then there doesn't seem to be that passion to govern.
No. And you've said time and again, the Dems embrace, especially the Pelosi, Schumer, Wasserman, Schultz Dems, they embrace being the JV team, being the minority party. Because then they can act like they really care about the people. Oh, shucks, look, the GOP's in charge and we can't get
it's the best for
They're
fundraising.
Really evil and all that.
Well, and the Republicans know that on the other side too, right? It's great to run against. But look at just look at this, the incredible thing. The reaction to Bernie Sanders is very mild statement after the election that the party has abandoned the working class.
Oh my God.
Not a radical statement. Not and even a few people like Chris Murphy actually said, yeah, you know what? He may have a point here.
It's almost like you're looking at our cue cards. It's almost like you're looking at our cue cards.
But here's the interesting thing about that. When he said that, Jamie Harrison, the head of the Democratic National Committee, came out and criticized, like, openly. This never happened.
Yes.
He openly criticized a member of the Senate Democratic Caucus, an independent who serves as a member of the Senate Democratic Caucus, really pushed back. And what was his pushback? The same thing you had in that clip of Debbie Wasserman Schultz saying, well, we passed this and we passed that. And it's like, you have like a little bit of a record of some things that you did. And you say, well, then the working class, they just don't get how great they have it and how much we've done for them. They somehow, I guess, are ungrateful. And the thing is, what Sanders was trying to do, what Jimmy Williams over at the Painters Union, a few of these other people have been trying to do, what Barbara Lee and others have been saying, a lot of really, principled people who have said in the aftermath of this election, look, we need to seriously examine why people who are struggling to get by don't see the party of Franklin Roosevelt as their party. Right. And
because they haven't done anything in forever and a day, and they're owned by neoliberal corporatists.
Listen, you can hate the game. You don't have to hate the player, as the saying would go.
I have come to the conclusion in my mind that I actually think that capitalism and democracy are incompatible.
No, they are incompatible. Well, however, a blended system.
We play around this, right? We talk about the term economic democracy, right?
Yeah.
And that is a very valid term. Tom Hayden, way back, 40 some years ago, tried the campaign for economic democracy. And what he argued, without using the word socialism, but he argued, that America had to be not just a political democracy, but an economic democracy. And what that meant was that people needed to be able to vote for a better life, right? And have it actually be reflected in their governance. And that democracy itself works. It really only works when there's enough equity, enough fairness in it that no one is so impoverished that they're just struggling to get by, right? No one is so wealthy that they can buy an election. And you think that's a modern concept or something like that. It's not. The people who formed the Republican Party back in the 1850s had been, many of them, abolitionists, which is great. Many of them socialists. It's important to remember that in Ripon, Wisconsin, where the Republican Party was founded, there was a socialist commune following a Fourierist socialist view, and that a number of the people who formed the Republican Party were active socialists. And then also another group of them were land reformers, people who said we got to redistribute the land so that the poor and immigrants actually have a place where they can farm. And one of the slogans of one of the founders of the Republican Party was "Vote yourself a farm." Now think about that. What they were saying in the 1840s and 1850s was democracy should be so real that if you vote for somebody and your party wins, you get a farm, or you get a job, or you get health care, or you get, what you need, housing, because that's what you voted for, and it happens. Now, we have so diminished the concept of democracy that people think, the big deal, I'm voting for this party. And what do I get if this party wins? Well, they're in power. Well, what do I get from that? Okay, well, they're in power. And,
what do you get?
Yeah, that's it. Right. And,
you
and
get
at the end of the day, that creates a system. You end up with a system where the very, very wealthy think it's so great that they just want to maintain the status quo.
Well, there are people that also see themselves as better than others. That's why most of the affluent class see themselves as benevolent to the people that are below, which is why I always like to point out when Wasserman Schultz was once confronted by a reporter who asked, "Why do people hate you so much?" He said, "Because I know better than them." I'm like, okay, well, at least you're being honest that you do think you are better.
In fact, I hate to say whether I think most political figures would probably be savvier than to say such a thing. But I suspect there's an awfully lot of political players in both political parties who think that.
Yes. And I also think that it's important to note that the day after such an election like this, where it was obvious that there were several players in the Democratic establishment, particularly the governor of Michigan, the governor of Illinois, the governor of California, the governor of Kentucky, and the the governor from Pennsylvania, are all thinking about running for president in 2028. Now, the senator from Connecticut who decided that he was going to do a mea culpa on what happened in the election. Look, Chris Murphy is, I have no issue with him. He's a senator. He has some good votes, some bad votes. Yeah. But as far as I can tell, he's going to try to make his play to, I guess, run in the left lane. Should he run for president in 28, which I think is entirely possible. So here's what he had to say the other day regarding Bernie Sanders' statement about the direction the Democratic Party needs to take.
Today was a cataclysm. Let's not kid ourselves. An electoral map wipeout. In the Senate, our effective ceiling for Democrats is now 52 seats. The ceiling for Republicans is 62 seats. That's unacceptable. And, well, nobody has all the answers right now. I certainly don't. What I think is most important is that we not kid ourselves. This is not a moment for small changes or reforms. This is a moment for a fundamental rebuild of the left. Just a couple decades ago, we could win races in Missouri and Florida and Ohio. Today, we get clobbered in all of those states. That's unsustainable for us and for this country. So here are a few thoughts that I have at the outset about the conversation we need to be having. First of all, we are not listening to the people we claim to represent. We claim to be the party of the working class, the party of poor people. And yet we let interest groups and think tanks tell us what those people need. That's why we end up with these relatively small ball solutions. I'm not saying they don't matter, but more roads and bridges, bulk negotiation of prescription drug prices, a little bit bigger tax credit for families with kids. That's not meeting the moment, because Americans are exhausted by a neoliberal economic order that has consolidated power in the hands of the few, that has forced them to become global citizens instead of having some unique local identity or a true sense of being an American citizen. Technology has forced us into these cycles of withdrawal from each other. People feel isolated, they feel impotent, they feel deeply anxious. Democrats spend almost no time actually matching policies to the way that people feel. Now, mass deportation and closing our borders permanently, that's bad policy. But it speaks to a legitimate feeling that people have, that there are these global forces like increased migration that are outside of our control.
See, that's not true, because we have a foreign policy of endless war and endless expansion that does create a significant portion of the migrant crisis.
Right.
Well, so in our economic policies, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
Endless war factor there as well, obviously. But, you know, we actually have all sorts of economic policies that have profound impact.
People are looking for,
as an example, Central America, Latin America. You know, I mean, we still got an embargo on Cuba, right? I mean,
we have sanctions on how many countries? Like it's something ridiculous. It's something ridiculous. It's absurd.
Can I just? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just gonna say, people don't realize how unbelievably crippling that is. So when we have all of our sanctions on a country like Venezuela, and their economy is just, their inflation is out of control and their economy is crap, and we point at them and say, see, socialism, when in fact it's our sanctions and what we've done to them economically that have put them in this position more than anything. And we take no ownership of this.
Not only that, John, but let's be honest, and this is where I tend to be a lot more conservative on immigration, because I feel like, especially as we've discussed, the only silver lining, in my opinion, of the Biden administration is the NLRB has been improved. Alina Khan has been an exceptional head of the FTC. And as far as I'm concerned, when you look at what was the signature labor moment of this administration, it was Sean Fain and the UAW getting that tremendous contract for the auto workers. And then you knew it was a big deal because you had Trump go up on stage on Elon's behalf and say, I really don't like that Sean Fain. He's a terrible person. And I'm thinking, yeah, you see, Trump is no different than the slot machines in his casino hotels in Atlantic City. It's like, put in the money, he'll do exactly what you ask him to do. And so by that measure, you're seeing that there is this sort of growth of the labor movement. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, the oligarchs have spoken. We can't have that.
No.
So flood that border, get as many people into this country that'll work for pennies on the dollar, and we'll screw everybody in the process. And like you said, it's the 0.1% of the people that really run the world they don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican in the White House. They're getting their filet mignon and, you know, potato gratin, whatever, you know, every night. It is what it is. So while I think Murphy is correct in a number of these points, this is a very key point that is being ignored, because corporate special interest has a lot to do with why we have these crises right now. So let's continue.
Without a doubt. But let's talk about Murphy for a second here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because you're great. It's great that you pulled him up here and put him in this position. The first thing to understand about Chris Murphy is that he has not been on the left per se as a senator. He's been a moderately liberal senator, a decent guy who actually focuses a little more on foreign policy than most, and sometimes intelligently. But this statement here, kind of the way he's doing it, even the cinema verite, the look of it, it's, you know, there, but for a couple of phrases, it's out of a Warren Beatty movie on somebody, you know, like some senator realizes the whole corrupt system and is going to, you know, speak out about it. It actually is. There's something quite invigorating about this, even though what he's saying isn't particularly radical. It's just,
listen, I know this is sacrilege, but I still haven't seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and I know I need to see that.
It's time, brother. But there's also all these Warren Beatty movies where the same, you know, Warren Beatty has made a movie, at least one or two, in which.
No, I saw Reds. I saw Reds earlier this year. So
no, it's not Reds though. He had a movie where he played it like it's Bullworth, right?
Bullworth.
Oh, I didn't see that.
It's Bullworth. Him and Haley Berry.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't this? It's kind of this, right? Where a political guy suddenly realizes, wow, the whole thing is crooked and awful, and maybe he doesn't realize it. Maybe he just acknowledges it and starts to talk about it. And so this is kind of a interesting thing in this regard. Two things that Murphy does here that are really important and will absolutely probably be passed over by 99% of people that talk about this. He uses the phrase "the left." That's huge. The Democratic Party never says the left, right? But he says in here, you know, the left really, you know, we got handed a hard result here, but there's things we need to do. And he's talking about the left. That's a big deal, right? Because the Republicans are very comfortable being conservative, being the right. Democrats, for the most part, are not comfortable, right?
Clearly, they'd rather be affiliated with the Cheneys. They are not comfortable with the left.
Exactly. And they don't use the term working class. They use the term middle class, right?
Yeah.
Nobody goes in the morning, gets up before dawn in the morning and, you know, gets in their car and drives to middle. They drive to work. right? And so their language is so out of sync. So the fact that he uses the term the left, that is actually in and of itself significant. The other thing he does here, and he doesn't get as deep into it as I wish he would, but the other thing he does is talk about technological change. Now, in this campaign, it's now become official that we always at the end of the campaign say, well, pretty much nobody mentioned climate crisis, right, in debates and things like that. And that's often the case. The climate crisis doesn't get the attention it does. But one of the things I will tell you is that parallel to the climate crisis, the thing that is dramatically changing kind of everything about how we live is AI technology, right? And the technological revolution that we are going through right now, which makes the digital revolution look like child's play. This is so much bigger. This is a combination of machine learning and robotification that can replace human workers in dramatic amounts of our economy, whole sectors of our economy. And that has only begun to be implemented, but will ultimately change everything about how we communicate, everything about how we work, most of everything about how we live, most of everything about healthcare. I mean, it's just, we are entering into a kind of a Moore's Law exponential shift moment where technology is going to just shake it up in ways that we can barely imagine. But the weird part is enough of it has shown already, both through the digital revolution, through the original robotification revolution, now for this extended machine learning revolution. We've seen enough of it to know we should be scared. Because while AI will do a lot of good things, it will also has potential to so dramatically change our lives and to make us, literally work harder to try and keep up with machines. This is a very anxiety-ridden moment because of that. And I don't expect the Republicans to talk about it because I don't think Donald Trump understands it. And I also think the Republicans are planning to make a lot of money off it. But the Democrats didn't talk about it either. And the fact of the matter is that it's what's important here is that Murphy is actually acknowledging some elements of that.
Right.
And I think if you want to get to the anxiety of the American people, you have to talk a lot more about that. We don't.
Well, I will say he's seizing an opportunity. He's seizing the moment.
You know what? At least somebody's trying. So
I'm for seizing opportunities, right?
Yes.
All right. So let's finish this out.
Yes.
Control. And one of the ways that Republicans deliver them a message of control is control of our borders. Democrats need to understand that Republicans start by examining the way that people are actually feeling and then matching policies to the way that they're feeling. Democrats need to start doing the same thing. If we did that, we would pick bigger fights. We would be a more populist party. We would name the corporations and the billionaires that are screwing people, and we would take it to them. Now, that's something that the Harris campaign did not do. And frankly, when leaders in our party like Bernie Sanders do it, they largely get shamed or shunned as dangerous populists. Maybe that's because if we actually were fighting billionaires, if we were actually engaging in true populist economic ideas, it would hurt our coalition, which these days tends to be higher income people who don't want the status quo fundamentally upset.
Yeah.
So for me, those issues of true economic populism, moving power from people that have it to people that don't have it, that has to be the tentpole of our coalition. And here's the other hard truth we have to face. We cannot win if we don't build a bigger tent. And in order to build a bigger tent, we likely have to have economic populism as that tentpole and then allow into the tent people that do not agree with us on 100% of our core social, cultural issues, as well as other hot button topics like guns and climate. I think we'd be better off fighting out discussions around some of those very difficult social and cultural issues inside our tent instead of pushing everybody who disagrees with us outside. So that's what I'm thinking about today.
That's pretty smart, and it's a very good point. And if it doesn't, that's the biggest problem with that overwoke left. And people, but it's interesting that people think that's what directed this campaign somehow, when all she was doing was talking about immigration and lethal military.
No, you took it away.
Yeah.
The most lethal fighting force.
Right. So how people equate that with, they were catering to the woke left, that I don't understand.
Yeah. And I would even go a step further. Look, my dear friend over many years, Tony Benn, who was the longest serving British member of Parliament, the Labour Party member of Parliament, who came in the post-war era and served through the Thatcher era as one of the most progressive leaders in the world. In the 1990s, I spent a good deal of time with him, and that was a period where there was a lot of objection to something they called political correctness. Now we call it woke. Right? Same thing, right? And by and large, what Tony was a brilliant politician who represented a really working class mining district in the north of England and Chesterfield. And really the kind of place where economics were kind of at the heart of everything. He said, you know what? What they call political correctness is, I think, basically what we used to call politeness. Right? That, if somebody wanted to be respected for who they were, understood for who they are, that you did that because you're a nice person, you're a decent person.
Right.
And so I don't actually think woke politics is a particular problem at all. In fact, I think by and large, we should be nicer and more polite to a lot of people in society. I think the reality is that people grow in their impression of other people. They become, hopefully more welcoming, more liberal in those ways. But I think that we often use this as an excuse. We say, oh, well, the Republicans campaigned against trans people, or they campaigned, they did all these things and stuff like that. I think those kinds of campaigns, which are vile and ugly and crude, only get traction because the discussion isn't being had on the other side, on the economic side, right? And so, then people start to argue about a whole host of issues that the Republicans have generated and put into the mix, including immigration. That's not to deny that there are immigration issues, but they have churned it up in such a way. They've churned up all these other things. How would you counter that? I've got an idea.
It isn't punching down. It isn't kicking down at immigrants.
But let me just finish the thought, and then respect whatever you say. How would you counter that? Here's how I would counter it. I would say, if you give us a power, we will end billionaires. There will be no more billionaires. We will tax them out of existence, right? That's true, Mr. Elon Musk. That's true, Mr. Jeff Bezos. Give us power. We're going to tax them out of existence, and we're going to take that money, right? They're going to still be rich. They have nice houses and boats, but they're just not going to have, the 200 billion. They're not going to be debating which of them is first to become a trillionaire, right? We're going to tax them. We're going to take that money to expand Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and a whole host of other programs. Do you know, if you said that on a campaign trail, right, I guarantee you the entire dialogue would shift over to that.
But they can't, because they take too much money from the billionaires.
Yes, but wouldn't it be nice to win? They
can't.
This isn't wherein lies the problem, because when you think about what
the chicken and the egg,
this is almost this is almost too much poetic justice. And yes, there could be a lot of suffering that will ensue as a result of that. And we're going to get to Trump and Miriam Adelson in a second. But it really comes down to this idea of there were some decent members of the House that had to go by the wayside. And I'm not saying that, Corey and Jamal didn't have their flaws. They certainly did, as far as I was concerned. But you're not going to tell me that two congressional representatives who do not take corporate special interest money should not be in the halls of Capitol Hill right now. And the reason that they're not is because the Democratic Party is not only spineless, but they are also completely engulfed in the same corporate money that the Republicans are engulfed in. There wasn't one person, not even Alex, who would open her mouth trying to act like a leader for the Democratic Party and say, I'm standing by my colleagues. I am not going to allow the Israel lobby to distort the realities that they are representative of the broken system that we have, that we can simply be silenced because the corporate money is just going to overflow into some name your opponent's position. You know, Jen basically martyred herself as a candidate because she decided that free Palestine was more important than to go along to get along to try to be, do viability. And of course, Debbie is one of the biggest AIPAC receivers in all of politics. Forget the Democrat versus Republican. You know, that to me says a lot.
Let me throw something in the mix here too, which is interesting. The one member of Congress who has been most outspoken about AIPAC is Mark Pocan.
Thomas Massey too.
Well, Massey too, on the right. You're right. Point well taken. But Pocan's been really aggressive.
Yeah, yes.
And taking his hits, right? You know, back and forth. Well, he just won re-election with 70% of the vote. And one of the things, and if you had Pocan on, I think he would say, one of the things he has tried very hard to do is to show that you can, in fact, go against AIPAC. That you can, in fact, that in fact, if more people did what Pocan did and has done, you could begin to shift the dynamic here, but so many do not.
Well, John, let me cut you off for a second because, full disclosure here, we did try to get Pocan on the podcast, and he said yes, and then he got blocked by one of his staffers. And so
I'm going to let you sort that out. And what I'm going to say though is that on this issue, I think, and I know we're going to get to finance in general, the broader sense of finance. Look, this to me is one of the most painful aspects of the 2024 campaign, and one that we can't neglect at a fundamental level. We knew a year ago that this issue had the potential to be devastating for Democrats, right? We knew.
Yeah.
We talked about it.
Oh, yeah.
Not an obscure thing. And I remember talking to people better part of a year ago saying, this is a big deal because Lyndon Johnson in 1968 was running for re-election as the most progressive president since Roosevelt, right? Who had done Medicare, who had done civil rights, who had done all these things. And he was burdened by the Vietnam War. So burdened that 4 days before the Wisconsin primary, he quit his campaign for re-election because he was going to be wiped out in a primary by an anti-war candidate. So the nomination was handed over to Hubert Humphrey. And they somehow imagined that handing the nomination off to someone else, if they didn't change the policy, was going to work. And Hubert Humphrey got beat by Richard Nixon, and in a very narrow defeat, by the way, got beat by Richard Nixon, and we lost 100 years of progress or potential progress. We lost the potential to continue the war on poverty, the potential to lock in many of the things that Johnson was doing, which were taking us in many ways in a direction of social democracy. And suddenly we're broken there, and the Southern strategy comes, all this stuff comes in. Why? Because they didn't have the courage to change policy on something they were absolutely wrong on, the Vietnam War. And I remember saying to people, if they don't do this with Gaza, right? If they don't get right about Gaza, as hard as it is, and believe me, the same thing was true at 68. It was hard to go against the Cold War. It was hard, very, very hard to go against the military industrial complex and establishment that was there. But because they didn't do that, they ended up losing the future, right? Well, similarly, we had that lesson. When the handoff finally came, by the way, months later, from Biden to Harris, that was the point at which to stop and say, look, this is not something you can talk your way around. You've got to acknowledge the policy is wrong, and that if Harris gets elected president, she will change that policy. And people say, well, you can't say that because Biden still maintains the policy. Yes, you can, right? And if you don't, you're going to end up with some devastating impacts. And I think, look, we don't have the full story on all the demographics and all the challenges. We actually get it, by the way, over time, because social scientists, political scientists, survey researchers actually do dig in enough that they can give you a lot of explanation for what happened. But I don't think there's much question that the drop-off, not just in vote in Michigan, but also in students on campuses across this country, which we saw, by the way, on a number of campuses. One of the reasons that you saw that drop off was because of a failure to move in the right direction on Gaza. And it wasn't even there. It wasn't even just on campuses and in Arab American areas. I was at an event over the summer in Lafayette County, Wisconsin, which is a very, very rural county. And I was speaking to a bunch of Democrats down there in this county. And I said, toward the end of my remarks, I have to tell you up front, or I have to tell you at this point, I oppose President Biden's policies as regards Gaza. They're wrong. And they fundamentally should change. And if they don't, it's going to be very damaging to them and stuff like this. And instead of them, booing me, right?
Right.
And one woman raised her hand and she said, look, I've been going to door out here in these rural towns for the Democrats. And she says, you know what I hear at the door a lot? I said, what? She says, Gaza. People, in small towns, right? Far from everything the media covers, are telling me that they feel really bad about this, that they feel like there's something fundamentally wrong here.
How could you not?
I agree with you. But what I'm telling you is, did our media begin to communicate that? I don't think so. And did Democrats acknowledge that? Now, I happen to believe Trump is going to be dramatically worse on Israel-Palestine.
Oh, this is going to be. He's
got Huckabee in there, right? So it's going to be dramatically worse. But before you can get to the discussion about Trump being dramatically worse, you have to get through the reality of you being wrong, of your party being wrong, right? So Democrats they can't communicate that Trump would be worse unless they acknowledge that they're wrong, that their policy is wrong. And would that have hurt? I know there's people who say, oh, wow, it just would have blown the Democrats away. It would have been awful. They would have, voters would have abandoned them. I don't think so. I actually think.
I feel like the Democratic Party, it's like dealing with a complete overt narcissist that's in full Darvo mode. Like they're just going to sit there and that's all they can do. They have no self-awareness whatsoever.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing, too. And this is something that I only realized after the election. So I'm always playing catch up. I understand that. But what did Trump project? Even when he was at his craziest, even when he was at his most offensive, so he often projected strength. Right?
Yes.
A lot of people said he was strong. He was going to do things. He's going to get things done. Even if they disagreed sometimes, they said, well, he's strong. He's going to be strong. Well, what projected more weakness than Joe Biden and by extension Kamala Harris saying this is the most powerful country in the world, right? We have this long-term ties to Israel, close ties to Israel for a long, long time. And yet we can't take the basic steps that would prevent a genocide.
No.
Well,
we don't want to.
That projects immense weakness. And,
so here we have a question in that vein.
Okay.
Go find its punch up, but I don't know if it's Pat or Lila. This is the question. It says, Mr. Nichols, why do you think Harris wouldn't even lie about her intentions with Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, just in order to win? Trump lied, which of course, like he promotes himself as the peace president. And then obviously we just saw who he's let's not be, none of us thought that. But so why do you think she wouldn't even lie and say they were going to do something?
Yeah, and the scary thing
is that Nixon, right? In 68,
right,
when he said he had a secret plan to end the war in Vietnam. His secret plan to end the war was to just keep it going, right?
Yeah, but but with that said, he did end the war in Vietnam. He just started one in Laos and Cambodia instead.
That's true. Well taken. And in fact, his secret plan was an absurdity, right? It was a lie, but it got him through the election. Why wouldn't Harris do that, right?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, I fear that she might well. I mean, I don't know. I've actually interviewed her over and been very impressed with her, by the way, on many issues, many ways. But I can't begin to get to. I don't have a grip on where she's really at on this. In her convention speech, she actually said some things that sounded encouraging, but she never followed it through. And whether that is a lie or an aspiration or whatever, however you describe it, maybe I think politicians all the time say things that they would like to see happen that they probably know won't happen for a variety of reasons.
She didn't even do that though.
That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. That's the point. She didn't even really say anything other than we need a ceasefire and to get the hostages back. Like she had no vision.
Yeah. And you see, this is the thing too, in my opinion. As difficult as this is, two things I think are important here. Number one, because this is such an issue, she needed to figure out how much she could break with Biden on it, whatever that was, and incorporate that into her standard stump speech. She needed to acknowledge it, right? It's actually a strong, I think it shows strength, right? It says, Joe Biden, I don't agree with Joe Biden on this. This is one place where I'm going to really break with him and I'm going to push harder. And Netanyahu should know that and the other people should know that. That I think would have been beneficial to some extent. The other thing is, and I know this is hard, but it is one of the great challenges of politics. Sometimes you have to confront those who are really mad at you and who disagree with you. And I believe me, I'm not in any way diminishing how hard this would be. But what if maybe one of those days that she was out with Liz Cheney, instead of spending a day with Liz Cheney, she went to Michigan and she went and met, even if it was with a relatively selected group of folks, but not in a private setting, in a public setting, and did that dialogue, right? Really talked with folks about this and took the hard statements, right? What if they had put a Palestinian on stage at the convention, a minor ask, right?
Yes.
I mean, it just, to me, there are so many places where, again, whether it's, aspirational or whether it's just a political move or whatever, there are so many places where it was possible to communicate a deeper concern, right? And something, and it didn't happen.
Nope.
And I'm going to tell you, that did damage. It did.
She doesn't connect with people. And she didn't when she ran, and she didn't win a single primary. She doesn't connect with people. She can't go in and sit down and have a 3-hour conversation with Joe Rogan. She can't do that. She can't exist off a script. It's fascinating.
Look, I'll tell you this. I think she grew. I was impressed with her in a number of ways. I have seen her and have been in conversation with her over the years where I have thought, this is a person who can connect with people. Right. And it's not to differ, because I think much of your point is real there. But I think that the consultant class in the Democratic Party arrives the second you become the candidate, or when you're even in the position of potentially being the candidate, and tells you everything you can't do and everything you shouldn't do. This isn't to make Kamala Harris into some perfect figure or to, hail her in every way, but it is to say that what they do to candidates, the way, and this isn't a defense of them, right? Because candidates should say no, right? I understand that. But the pressure that is on candidates to be less than you need to be is amazing. And I just think that's writ large across this campaign. I think it was writ large across the first part of the campaign where Biden was the candidate, and they were just telling people not to believe what they were seeing, right? And then the second part, when Harris was a candidate, and they were like kind of living in this fantasy that you could run a narrowly defined campaign that didn't take risks, that didn't do the things that needed to be done. Yes, of course, there should have been time spent with Joe Rogan. There should have been time.
Well, a lot of different things, but I just think at the end of the day, people don't really like her.
Well, some may not, but you know how you get liked if you're disliked? Spend more time
things
with
people like.
Well, that's popular, but then also you spend more time with them, right?
Yeah.
Do you know what? People like folks who take on challenging situations, right, and challenging issues. I give you a good example. Again, I love talking with you guys because we so often do history, right? And we try to bring it in and bring it up. 1968, April 4. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was a transformative figure in America, the face of hope for what the country might be, and somebody who was actually super right about Vietnam and a host of other things, who had transformed many of our debates about race, doing so many good things. He's assassinated. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had to appear, I think, in Indianapolis that night.
It was Gary, Indiana, actually.
Was it Gary? I'll give you. I trust your judgment. It was in Indiana.
Gary, it was an all black event.
It was outdoor. I think it was outdoors, and it was with a crowd of people. And Kennedy had to tell the crowd that King had been assassinated. Yep. And I mean, do you know what consultants today would tell you? They would say, "Don't go near that. Don't even. Come on. You don't have control over that situation." He had to tell that crowd what had happened because most of them didn't know it. In fact, I think nobody did. And then he had to, with his own words, communicate, to talk to them, to hear them, to hear their open pain, open expression. If you look at the video, it's an amazing thing. But then to speak about his own loss, about what it meant, about how to go forward in this horrible moment. And I think more than almost anything else, that's what formed our sense of Robert F. Kennedy, who had once been quite disliked politically, right, and seen as kind of craven and self-serving. Suddenly, you saw him as, wow, this is someone who has something going on that is deeper and more relevant. He took the risk, right? He went with people who might be very angry, might be very upset. You don't know the response. You don't know what it's going to be, but yet you believe, you show this faith in the American people, right? That they will hear you. And if you don't do that, see, I disagree with you, Jen. And I'm, respectfully, I'm not sure the American people dislike Kamala Harris. I'm not sure they knew her. And
that might be.
And the way you get known is to go and do these difficult things.
That might be. I just she's not my person.
I do think
I respect that.
Yeah. And I do think that there was a line in the sand. And look, I think, Jen and I had said for months that genocide is a red line. And whether you're willing to move on that issue or not, this is what the next 4 years at least are going to look like. And the great thing about this, if there is a silver lining, I believe that there is one, my opinion, is that I do think eventually a lot of these privileged liberals are just going to come around to the reality that the left has a lot more political power than they'd like to admit, and that eventually it is going to be realized because the line was drawn in the sand. We were willing to take this guy on for another 4 years to really make a point now, and the point has been made.
Oh, yeah.
Now, a lot of times when it comes to these corporate special interests, they're faceless. People don't know who these people really are. But if there is a face of the Israel lobby, you're looking at her right now. Miriam Adelson is the biggest pro-Israel donor in all of politics, and it's not close. This woman and her late husband, casino magnate Sheldon Adelson, it became known as the Adelson primary since the days of George W. Bush. Basically, you want to become the nominee, bless you, in the GOP, you have to kiss their ring. And their number one issue is Israel, point blank, period.
Yeah, this is why he moved the embassy to Jerusalem.
And that was their request. Initially they had no interest in him in 2016, and Trump had already created so much momentum as being this sort of grassroots on the ground, Bernie Sanders style candidate in the GOP. At that point, it was kind of irrelevant. But this time around, he needed the capital because his small dollar donations were nothing like they were back in 2016 or even 2020. I do think Trump fatigue was definitely a factor. I think if this was redone again, I think Trump would have won by a much more substantial margin. And I think a lot of people are willing to overlook the genocide because they think Trump's going to be better on domestic issues. For whatever reason, they choose to believe that that's the way it's going to go. And that's how they justify,
I don't know who thinks that.
The vote. However, this is a very serious issue. that I do think is going to get a lot more traction when it comes to recognizing that corporate special interests have taken over our politics. This woman gave Trump $100 million for his campaign. And lo and behold, you're now seeing the effects of that within the first couple of days. And he's not even president yet, but he's already made it well known that Elise Stefanik is going to be the ambassador to the United Nations.
Huckabee.
Mike Huckabee will be the ambassador to Israel, and Marco Rubio, who thankfully will no longer be in the Senate.
I was going to say, Florida, we are draining our swamp.
Yeah,
our swamp is going.
But now they really are going to hate Florida because we're putting that on the rest of the country.
You guys are getting Matt Gaetz, Marco Rubio, and what's his face? The congressman.
Waltz. Waltz is coming as well.
Bring yourselves back up so I can see you better.
Okay.
Look, this is the interesting thing about money in politics, right? It does two things. It does buy the maintenance of the status quo, which for most of money, that's what they want, right? But it also buys influence on a variety of issues, right? The interesting thing is that I live in Wisconsin, and it happens that the politics of my state of Wisconsin are influenced by some of the biggest donors in American politics, the Uline family, which you've never heard of. You haven't seen their picture, right? What they want is they hate unions. They hate an empowered working class, and that's, to me, that's really important to understand, because they gave more money than your guest there a moment ago. They gave more money to Trump and the Republicans. The biggest donor to Trump and the Republicans was Timothy Mellon. And how many people know him, right?
I've heard of him.
The Mellon family, so maybe we should know that. But the amount of money that he gave was exponential. And he has all sorts of quirky little interests, right? That will be represented in our politics because he gave so much money. It's in the tune of like 130 million, and probably that's an undercount. And then he also gave a huge amount of money to accelerate the RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. campaign before Kennedy dropped out, because at one point they thought that Kennedy would potentially be a burden to Biden, right? It turned out it ended up being something of a threat to Trump. And so what we need to understand is that money in politics, which Bernie Sanders talks about all the time, is a huge issue. And we should recognize that on so many of the issues we care about, the humane, decent politics of the great mass of Americans gets wiped away, gets swept out of the mix because of this mass amount of money. What we know in America is that huge numbers of Americans want peace and justice in the Middle East. The polls actually tell us that. And these are Jewish Americans, Muslim Americans, Christians, non-believers, right? Across the spectrum, who want peace and justice, right? And yet, they're not heard. They're not given, their place in our politics. Now, part of it is what?
Thornton Mellon. Somebody put up Thornton Mellon when you said Mellon, back to school from the back. Yeah. Rodney Dangerfield.
There you go. Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is our politics is a mess.
Oh,
that disconnects it from the decency of Americans.
Well, the bribery is just too obvious now.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't even know, Peter. I'm not even sure it's bribery anymore. This is one of the interesting things.
No, it's just business.
No, it's just no. But I'm going to say, I could take it a step further. What I'm going to say is this: I think when there's so much money flowing in from so many interests, at a certain point, people in politics, they kind of they don't even have to be asked to do what they do politically. They just assume, okay, well, this is what I have to do.
Assume the position
to keep the money flowing, right? This is what I have to do. And this is why, as Bernie Sanders is a very interesting figure in this regard, because I think some people don't even hear it anymore as much as they should. But in almost every one of his speeches, he devotes a substantial portion of it to money in politics, right?
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't even hear that anymore. They just, because they're so, it's been said before, right?
A lot.
And yet, I think that Sanders is so right about this, because money in politics doesn't just bribe or warp or mess up our politics, right? Money in politics makes us into something that we are not, right?
A democracy, not a democracy.
Right. And also that again, I believe if you stopped the first 100 people on the street and you said to them, you really think that what's happening in Gaza is appropriate? I think the vast majority of them would say, no, it's horrible. It's just, and I think, again, folks who are Jewish, Muslim, Christian, non-believing, across the board, if you ask them, they would say, this is horrible. And yet, at the top of our politics is barely debated, right? And it's not just that. I think we need to recognize, why is it that so much of our policy is not debated and discussed, right? Why are so many issues like AI, like climate, like the condition of working people in this country, why are these issues so off the table? Why are they not central to our discussion? Why do we have such a empty debate in this country? I think
because that affects capital. Now you're talking about stuff that affects capital. We can't talk about that. We could talk about trans people in bathrooms, and we can talk about things like that, because that doesn't affect capital.
But if you talk about the top marginal tax rate, then you're really walking into it.
You get into something real there. And again, if you say, we shouldn't have billionaires, right? Billionaires are a policy failure.
Absolutely.
Right? If you said something as radical as that, well, that would shift the whole debate. And the weird thing about it is, I think that within the Democratic Party, people have convinced themselves that if you shifted the debate toward a place of moral outrage, that shift, I think Democrats think, well, somehow we'll lose on that. Somehow that'll go against us in some way. I would say the opposite. I would think that Trump kind of figured something out. He figured out that if you say, you're mad and that's good, you're right to be angry. It's good to be angry, right?
Yes.
And I think that benefited him. I think if Democrats said, you're angry, it's good to be angry, we're morally outraged, we have no idea where that would end up. The worst thing that would happen is you might get beat. Maybe if you did the right thing and it just didn't turn out for you well, maybe you'd lose the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. Oh, that already happened.
Exactly.
And so the refusal to take the risk of doing the right thing for peace and justice, for economic democracy, for humanity, right? The taking that risk of doing it is, yes, maybe it doesn't work, but boy, that's where you'd end up where you're at now, right? That's where you'd end up if it really didn't work. On the other hand, if it did work, maybe, just maybe, as a country, we could take the leap in the direction that we want to go.
Someone has to stand. I mean, it takes a certain amount of courage, but I think that also but they have to want that. And I don't know that the people in those positions care about that policy. They are they're staunch Zionists. So they don't care about that policy. They they're in favor of this. I actually think participating full on, I don't think they care at all. And so I think it's hard to sell that when everyone sees that you're totally in on it.
But I think this is a country. I think it's a country where the great mass of people understand that racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia, hate is wrong. I really do.
I do too.
And if you call people to that, right? If you call people to that in our politics, I think there's a real potential to speak to those better angels, right? To actually, like people say, yes, you know what? I want to be that. And Peter, I know you haven't watched Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
I will.
But I'm just to tell you,
the holiday season. So
that's sort of the point of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, that this guy who's beaten down and is losing everything, at a certain point, he has nothing left to lose, and he gets up and he actually says basically exactly that as a country, we can be more decent, that we can be better and stuff like this. And that, frankly, money and politics and stuff like this are bad. It's all there. And obviously the point of the movie is that when you do that, people actually respond. And I know it's crazy, and we've gone way long tonight, and I apologize for that because we've talked so much. But the other day, a friend of mine passed away. His name was Fred Kessler. He was a former state legislator and judge in Wisconsin. He had come up in politics. He was 84 when he passed. He had started in politics as a legislative candidate in the days when you had to be 21 years old to vote. So he ran as a 20-year-old, and he got elected. He beat an incumbent, got elected to the Wisconsin legislature as a 20-year-old. He turned 21 on the day he was sworn in. So he couldn't vote for himself, but he could be sworn in, and he became a state legislator. He was elected on the ticket with John Kennedy and Gaylord Nelson in 1960. As a 21-year-old, youngest guy in the legislature. And he came in, and fought for civil rights and voting rights and labor rights and women's rights. And he was a remarkably successful legislator. And then he became a judge. And then after many years as a judge, and he campaigned against a racist judge and beat him in an election. Many years as a judge, he left and he was doing other things. He became a rather successful guy. And in the last 15 years of his life, he ran for his old legislative seat and got it back. So at the beginning of his life and at the end of his life, he was a state legislator. And the one thing was, he was always a progressive. He was always trying to do the right thing. And I remember I talked to him about this once, and I said, wow, this is it's a pretty great career. And he said, you know what? I came up at a time when we actually believed it was possible to fix everything, to actually make things better, right? To have a transformational impact. And I never thought differently. And I don't think today that we have enough Democrats, frankly, who believe that, who believe you can fix everything, change everything, and make it better, and are willing to take the risks to do it. Fred took tons of risks. He lost elections. Well, he lost a lot of elections along the way. He lost election for the state Senate. He lost two elections for Congress. I mean, he had plenty of defeats on his list, but he kept on going. And I've been thinking about him a lot recently, because in his 80s, when he was pretty old man, he still he had that twinkle in his eye, that belief that it was all worthwhile, that you could do it all. And I know that may sound naive and like rose-colored glasses at the end of this long conversation about all this politics and all these things. But I don't think the Democratic Party is ever going to make it to where it needs to be politically to be a transformational party, unless it actually believes that, right?
Right.
And
yes.
and you two keep banging away, trying to get it there. And your viewers and maybe people like what you say and maybe some don't, and maybe people, you got knocked down a few times, Jen. But I do think that we all have a choice, and that is, do you keep trying? Do you keep pushing for this, trying to break the wheel, as it were? And I think that this is one of those testing moments, right? And I think people who have had a deep frustration with the Democratic Party for a very long time are probably in a healthier spot than those who are just coming to it now, right?
Yes, it takes a while.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is they understand that this is an ongoing fight. This isn't something new. Chris Murphy has now recognized it. Good for him, right?
Yeah.
Some people recognized it a long time ago. what we need to do in this point, and I, maybe this is at least a closing thought for me, for what it's worth. What we need to do in this point is to study the failures of the left, right, along the way. Recognize that we've been here before, and we don't want to get here again, right? We don't want to stay here.
No.
And so, yes, is this a point for real soul searching and for a real battle for the soul of the Democratic Party, and more importantly, for a battle for the soul of our politics? I think so. And I think that that's hard to do at a time when you're also dealing with Donald Trump, who is a very destructive and dangerous figure, right?
No, I'm really great. No,
I hear you, brother. But what I'm saying is that's hard to kind of do both, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you that the way out of this malaise, this moment, is to figure out how to make a different and better Democratic Party, or at least, or a different and better politics. And if you figure out a way outside the Democratic Party to a multi-party politics, I'm not going to, criticize that. But what I am going to say is, if this soul searching and this examination doesn't get to a different Democratic Party, right? If it doesn't, if it pulls its punches, if it's insufficient, right? That I genuinely think we could lose a generation of voters who just literally decide.
I think it could be a Whigs type situation.
Yeah,
I think we're that close. And I think that Murphy, the scariest part of all, John, and we can leave on this note. The scariest part of all is that Murphy's the only senator that stepped up and actually said that.
Yeah, Bernie did.
No one backed him up. In fact,
other than Bernie, I mean,
yes,
that's what he's saying. Yeah,
but Bernie still isn't independent. Like even though
he's unique. I agree. I agree.
And so while Murphy made that statement, you're still seeing statements, and maybe this is reflective in the fact that the party kind of has to die for a while in order for it to finally change. Wasserman Schultz is not stepping away. Schumer is not giving up the minority position in the Senate. Jamie Harrison is not going to step down as head of the DNC. And Nancy Pelosi is still controlling the entire party. And this is something that at some point people have to realize it is this kind of pride from their cold dead hands type situation. That is the difference.
The good news is they're all getting way up there in age.
And I think it's something else too. I think, look, I agree with that in many levels, but I will counsel this. It's the challenge in the Democratic Party goes deeper than any individual or even any group of individuals. Because the fact of the matter is, before many of these people we're talking about were born, there was still a force within the Democratic Party trying to keep it from becoming a progressive party, right? And so what we have to understand is that there will always be a coalescence of people who recognize, frankly, genius in politics, right? That we have a two-party system. And if you get control of one of those parties, right, you can actually define that system, even if you don't always win, that you can have a definitional role in that system. Trump realized that with the Republican Party. He figured out, boy, I get control of this party. I'm going to be, I'm going to at least have 45% of the vote. And if I can play with it a little bit, I can, win more. And there you go. And so the fact of the matter is that the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party has been ongoing for maybe forever, but at least for the last 80 years, I would argue. And if you understand that, you understand that if you're getting into this fight, right, you're fighting against something that isn't about individuals. It runs much deeper, and it is not going to change until progressive forces decide that they want to have control of the Democratic Party, not because they love the Democratic Party or hate it, but because it's one of these two parties. This is the one that they have the potential to have some voice in, some power in, and that they're gonna fight for it, because it's the way that you change the course of the country. This isn't about partisan politics. This is about,
it shouldn't be. Yeah,
it should be about getting to something deeper. And what we talk about is economic and social and racial justice, saving the planet, and peace.
Yeah,
that is not a complicated agenda.
No,
but it is. If we can't get to a political party that is for that, right, then how do you possibly get a country that is for that, right? How do we get there? And, you know, this is going to be, I don't want to end on a bummer note, so I'll end on a high note. History tells us that there have been causes and issues that have been so important that people have been born, lived their life in struggle, and died without achieving their goal, and yet handed off the fight to another generation that was born, lived its life, struggled, and died without achieving its goal. And then, amazingly, we got there, right? And so maybe in your lifetime you don't see what you wanted, but you still believe that it is so important that you commit to it and you fight for it. That's what abolitionists did. There's no question. Generations born, lived their life, and died. That's what battlers for women's rights did. That's what battlers for LGBTQ rights did. That's what battlers against anti-Semitism have done. That's what battlers for the rights and the future of Arab Americans and Palestinian Americans have done. That's what all sorts of people have done. Many people are in the midst of a struggle still, and they are not where they hope to get. But the truth of the matter is that we know that at times, and many times, we've gotten there. The founding of this country, only 4 to 5%, maybe 6% of people could vote. White, male, property owners. Exactly. Very narrow group of people. Folks have suffered and fought and died to expand that percentage out, right? And to get to a point where now most of us, not all of us, can vote. None of that was given to people. It was won through immense struggle. We are now at another stage of that struggle. And I think the stage is always to defend voting rights, but now to make real voting rights. And that gets us to that thing you were talking about quite a while ago, Jen, economic democracy, making it more real on a fundamental level. I'll come back and talk to you at some time.
Yeah, no, for sure. We could talk. We could talk forever. We could talk about so many things.
But what I'll say is I'll come back and talk to you, and let's measure our progress.
Okay.
And if we haven't had progress, let's figure out what we're doing wrong, and let's measure some more.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to give up on this, know, and I know you won't. And so we got 3 of us. We're going to be talking about it for a while, and maybe we're going to even get beyond talk, and maybe in that most difficult of moments, we see what Rebecca Solnit refers to as hope in the dark, and we start to actually get someplace because we so need to.
Let's leave on this note. The interesting thing about Adam McKay, who we're trying to get on this podcast, been trying to get him on for a while. He really likes Jen, and hopefully he'll like me as well. I really think that if you look back at where the Republican Party was in the summer of 1974, a lot of people thought that the Republican Party was dead. But lo and behold, I managed to really cause a shitstorm in this country in just a few short years. And we all know that anything can change in a short period of time. But a lot of things were daunting, and a lot of things were really bad when Reagan came to power. And ultimately, things are bad. They are going to get worse. But I do think that enough people are looking around at the system that we have right now, and millions upon millions of people don't want it anymore. They just need a path that they can follow, that they know they can trust. If we can figure that out, at least over the next couple of years, I think we'll head in the right direction. Going to take some hurt. It's going to take a lot of pain, but I think we can get there, because what the hell? I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. John Nichols of The Nation. Guys, if you are not subscribed, make sure that you get over there and check out his work. Also follow him on Twitter and or X, politically correct. But your work is immensely important. Wisconsin politics has always been one of my favorites. You should come back again, so we can actually talk about the real rigged election, which was the 1912 GOP primary, which is what ultimately led Teddy Roosevelt, my favorite president, to run as the Bull Moose Party, and ultimately led to, in my opinion, the worst president in the history of the United States, Woodrow Wilson. So,
all right, you stop geeking out.
I know we got to stop it here, but you're wrong. It was Andrew Jackson. And
Okay.
so
I will accept that answer. I can go with that answer. Andrew Jackson definitely was a bastard, and that's probably the nicest way that
if you
I could
have that
describe
discussion
him.
again, you should definitely bring on Margaret.
I would be happy to bring
You
on
know what?
Margaret.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now we really got to go because it's really getting late. But I want to just say in closing here, we should do a show and we should have an honest, broad debate about the worst president in American history.
Okay.
Yes.
And that would be
good.
and people have to come with their A game, right? You know, everything they've got. We know who the competitors are. We can even like knock a lot of stuff out
The problem is, if we're being honest with ourselves, the three worst presidents in our history, with the exception of George W. Bush, because I think he's that bad,
he's up there,
are all Democrats. Andrew Jackson, Andrew Johnson, and Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah,
and there are many arguments to be made as to why
you're ruining the whole potential of a future.
I do not debate your points, and in fact, maybe we could even have some sort of bow to optimism, have the best presidents too, and unfortunately, obviously good to the good, FDR would be there. Unfortunately, high in the competition would be Eisenhower.
I think you've got Teddy, you've got FDR, you've got Eisenhower, you've got Lincoln, you've got Washington. And I do think that if he had lived, I think JFK would have been in the conversation.
Oh, man, we got a lot of ways to go. I'm going to let
all right.
That's a
Thank
good
you so much, John.
Honored to be with you.
Always. Bye.
Have a great evening. One of our favorites. And
always.
As you know, we can always go on for hours.
Oh my God.
We've got
about everything.
We've got a lot that obviously we could have additionally covered tonight, but we're going to cover one more story because this is one that Jen obviously wanted to get to.
I got three of a kind just from that conversation. Yeah, I got three of a kind. Well, with my Joker wild card, I got three of a kind.
Joker. So
I'm playing war criminal poker. And so what I'm doing is I have these war criminal deck cards. And so every time somebody is mentioned in conversation, I'm pulling out the card. So far, I've got the 5 of spades, which is Kamala Harris, the ace of spades, which is Joe Biden. And we did mention Bernie, and he is one of our jokers. I actually have with Joker Wild 3 of a kind right now. So.
I could be a little bit of a joker because I should have fought a lot harder for the American people, and that's my fault. And I apologize.
And war criminal poker will continue.
We agree, Arlene. John Nichols is a real journalist,
yes,
and a real author, and a guy who just really knows his stuff.
Yes,
and he is a true upper Midwest progressive and Wisconsin.
6th generation Wisconsin. Eighth.
Which is amazing when you think about it. That probably goes back to the Civil War. 8 generations. That's probably Civil War territory.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Wisconsin has always had, again with Joe McCarthy versus Mr. Follett. You have this mixture, as we've seen in the state, of very progressive, but also very libertarian. So having to find that happy medium, I think, is important.
So are we going to do the fun with math?
We're going to do fun with math.
This is one of it's a fun with math. It's sort of like an educational mathematical opportunity.
What we have learned, and our friends Keaton and Russell over at Due Dissonance had pointed out, covering this a little bit earlier in their haste. And again, I think Russell Dabular he's that throwback old school Jew from New York who just really, he's working class. He's got the working class disposition. He's just very New York, he totally gets it. He gets what these people are going through every day. And he made a very salient point that I think a lot of us need to understand is that one of the biggest threats to the Democratic and just the overall political and economic establishment when Bernie ran in 2015 and 2016 is that he did it with real grassroots on the ground type people.
Correct.
He didn't do it with the consultant class. He didn't do it with these people that commanded these insane salaries that brought nothing to the table of value except to keep the money flowing.
Now, we all know I have a lot to say about this. I have a lot to say about the WCCC. And for anybody who doesn't know, I know we talk about the DCCC, but we need to talk about the WCCC. That's what I call white collar campaign carnies.
Jay, you didn't come too late. You came for a very good ending.
This is good. So white collar campaign carnies, the WCCC, that consultant class of people, these are the people, the sycophants that basically they're like, they just suck off of campaigns like leeches. They suck off of campaigns, and they don't care if the campaign wins or loses. And especially in the Democratic Party, in the Democratic Party, consultants can lose continuously over and over and over again and keep getting hired. So Kamala Harris' campaign, for people who do not know, raised $1 billion.
1 billion, 18 million is what they raised.
Now, she is ending up about 20 million in the hole. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so she, after raising, and keep in mind, people, this campaign was 107 days. Was that the?
That is correct.
So in 107 days, her campaign raised over $1 billion and spent more than it raised, and that should offend everybody. Now, by comparison, Trump's campaign. I only like applied math. So statistics. I would say statistics. I'm an applied math person.
I aced statistics and algebra, and I did okay.
I actually think I have dyscalculia, and was just never diagnosed.
That means you don't know how to use a calculator.
That's what it means. No, because my son has that, and he has been diagnosed, and I am almost like I get triggered from PTSD from all the issues I had in math growing up. Like, it was horrible. I mean, I can't. So I watch him, and it's hard, but. So no, this is applied math. So by comparison, $1 billion, Trump raised about $400 million, right? Around $400 million. And he spent a lot less. So like 340 something, right? So he's not in the red. He has a little surplus in his little campaign, treasure trove. And isn't that nice? Okay. So I want to point out something very important in addition to just the general disgustingness of the amount of this money. It's how much they proportionately, each campaign, spent on staffing. And this is something that is very important. And I find it is absolutely much more infinitely disgusting amongst the Democratic parties, the amount of political consultants, and not just how many, but how much they charge and what they make. So for a 3-month campaign, Kamala Harris's full-time staff was, what was it? 50 million.
56 million. Trump's campaign spent 9.
Okay. So you think about that proportionately. She spent 56 million on full-time staff.
Now here is an interesting statistic that we wanted to point out. Patrick Bet-David, as you guys know, is a conservative commentator. He's not, he's business conservative, but he's here in
I don't
Fort
mind
Lauderdale.
him. I don't mind him. He has some decent takes.
He does. I wouldn't say that Adam has any decent takes, but that's a whole other story. Adam's his Zionist partner.
Oh, I don't know that.
So campaign spending, Trump raised $381.54 million. Trump spent $345.42 million. Remember, part of the reason you don't spend all of the money is because you have to make sure that if there are any vendors or staff or anybody who needs
you have to not only that, but sometimes you end up having to return certain you have to have money on hand.
Mm-hmm. Kamala raised, again, these numbers fluctuate, but $1.003 billion
in 3 months.
Kamala spent $1.37 billion, and Kamala spent $582.53 million on staff.
She spent more than half. Well, now we were talking full-time staff.
Now, keep in mind, we're talking, this is a combination of vendors.
But then is his 10.4 million a combination too?
I have, well, according to what I read, it was 9 million for full-time staff.
Okay. So then for her, with full-time staff and consultants that are not full-time. So let's be very real. Okay. She spent more than $500 million on political campaign staffing for a 107-day campaign.
And let's be honest.
And let me be very clear. I guarantee you that there were succubists on that campaign that are like probably 10-time losers that were on that campaign that were probably making 20 grand plus a month. And she probably had a whole bunch of them. And these people, by the way, and a lot of these, the people I believe people like the Clintons and people like Debbie and all that, one of the biggest things is about feeding all their friends and cronies in this whole consultant class. It's a giant grift.
No, absolutely. And that's why they all
grift.
have to. That's why Debbie has to go on CNN. That's why Jamie Harrison has to say that Biden was a very successful president. That's why Nancy Pelosi has to throw Bernie under the bus, because you're not going to see the change in the Democratic Party. I don't know if it's possible, because they've shown time and again that what's more important to them is getting paid. That's the number one priority.
Well, and it's just pathetic because the Democrats really are defeatist in so many ways, and they really have resigned themselves to just playing defense and being losers. And their consultant class is that. They have so many people that just get recycled. They recycle so many losers amongst their campaign.
We've seen this down here.
Unbelievable.
We've seen this down here
at a local level.
And at the local level.
Oh my God.
And it's like the story I told you guys on Monday night. You know, we have a few, not a lot, but we have a few very good mayors in the area. Now, unfortunately, because of the way Debbie governs, if you want to call it that, rules with an iron fist, and nobody, even if they have told us in private, and several of them did, that they voted for Jen, but they cannot come out publicly because of the wrath that Debbie will throw at them.
Because she's not gracious. She would never get over it, and they have to work with her. And
Debbie hangs around in little chat groups on Facebook to get the confirmation bias from these little groups that they still love me.
It's so pathetic.
They still think I'm great.
Yeah. It's pitiful. But so I wanted to point that out because I don't think people really understand the complete grift of the consultant class on the Democratic side. I'm not saying it doesn't exist on the Republican side. Of course it does. But
you actually have to win. You actually have to win.
You have to win. And as you can see that difference. By the way, Trump's campaign was how much longer than Kamala's campaign? And he spent between 10 and 11 million, and she spent more than $500 million on staffing. And I guarantee you that 99% of the people weren't worth what she paid them and probably didn't do anything but sit there and just feed at the trough of her campaign donors. And now they're in the red. Now they're in the red. And you know what? I am curious to see how so is it Hillary to the rescue again? Does she clean up this mess? Like, how are they going to clean this up?
Emoji, I will tell you that John Nichols.
No, he didn't say that.
Very clear. And he's one of the good ones because he's a lifelong Democrat.
Absolutely. He made it very clear.
He knows that this party is damaged goods.
And that he doesn't begrudge anybody doing outside of it or as third parties or anything like that. He was very specific. He didn't tell us.
Yeah.
He might not want to give up trying, but he didn't tell us that we should never give up trying to change them.
Right now, we have another great Wisconsinite, Harvey K., who will be joining us on Monday night. I'm also going to try to get Margaret Kimberly to come on because I'd like to have that conversation again.
Oh, talk about you geeking out.
Yeah, very good pair.
Wait, who were you having together?
I want to try to potentially bring Margaret Kimberly on with Harvey again.
Oh my God. Have we had them on together before?
They were on once before.
Okay.
So we're going to do that. And then on Thursday, we are going to have Angela McArdle, the chair of the Libertarian Party.
Nice.
And CanCon, our very libertarian friend who lives here in West Broward and is a big fixture on YouTube as well.
He's a very big Second Amendment enthusiast.
He's a very big constitutionalist. Which I am, which we both are.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But I think that's what puts off a lot of people, especially the very delicate people.
Now, if you want to know what I think is the most plausible path forward right now outside of the two-party system, it's in the Libertarian Party. That's your best shot because they have an infrastructure. They actually have a top-down. They have a real chair. They have real fundraising. The problem with the Libertarian Party is that it's way too right-leaning anarchistic right now to be too appealing to the masses. However, if you go and read their charter, and we're going to do that on next Thursday, you will find that a significant portion of what they actually believe as a party is actually the majority of issues most people agree on.
The problem with them, okay, is that they do not support social safety net. They do not support public education. I got some issues with those people.
So that's where the negotiation has to come into play because, and this is what I will plead to McArdle, and I would tell her, you have a real opportunity here to draw millions of disaffected voters into your party because they are sick of this two-party duopoly. If you get right on healthcare, if you get right on education, and if you get right on a living wage, you could take over the country.
But they don't, because that's fundamentally not libertarian. See, you're trying, again, it's like a Jews for Jesus thing. You're trying to force something that isn't there. I do want to point out, though, that Butch Ware has announced that he is running as a Green Party candidate for governor of California.
Good. And he announced it at the right time.
And I think that is an excellent plan. Because isn't Newsom terming out anyway.
Yes, he
right?
is. Mitsunagi, you are right. They are the best and the worst at the same time, because trying to get them to find that happy medium is the key. Now, again, I look at it this way. And the one issue that I think we could move them on is single payer healthcare, because it is the most cost effective way to run a healthcare system.
They just do not believe that government should be running anything.
But again, it's not government run, it's government funded.
No, but once it's funded, then you have I'm telling you that this is my ultimate problem with the libertarians. And you know what? This is where like I'm really with Grumbine, because I just feel like at the end of the day that every man for himself, pull yourself up from your bootstraps is just it's not conducive to the life I want to live in civilization, right? Like that's just not the world I want to live in. And I find that ultimately libertarians, when it comes to economics, are that is just
so then it comes so then what it comes down to is, are they do they want to continue masquerading as a on the margins fringe third party, or do they actually want to try to go for it? Because right now there is an opening for them to go.
Well, they would have to be economically populist and be civil libertarians, which is basically,
I'm telling you guys,
what I am. That's basically who I am.
I'm telling you, some issues are deal breakers. Obviously, there are things that would need to be worked on. Like I said, it's basically 3 issues that I saw. Their opinion about taxes, their opinion about they're
the kind of people that probably well, first of all, they probably think taxation is theft.
It's a weird way that they wrote it. They wrote it that paying taxes should be optional.
Yeah. See, this is the kind of thing that I just find so completely and utterly realistic. It's like this idea of invisible hand government. And I just, I don't think that works with, like, if you're living on a commune.
It's it's not even a question of whether it's open hand. Open hand. Is that what you described it as?
It's it's sort of like the invisible hand, like,
well, the invisible hand, no,
they said it was about business, but this is about an invisible hand about all things.
What I do agree with the libertarians on is I do like the idea of us having a say in how our taxes are spent. I do think that, and again, you can get into the whole which one?
Tom Steyer.
Where is
Kat Negrita? What do you think about Tom Steyer?
Don't care for him.
Isn't it the guy that he ran very briefly?
Yeah, he did. Listen, he's another billionaire. He owns, I forget.
I think I'm confusing him with the Starbucks guy.
That's Howard Schultz.
Yeah.
He sucks to high.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I think because they both ran.
Yeah, they did.
Okay, that's why I'm confusing this.
Yeah.
But Steyer ran as a Democrat.
Well, I tell you, the one thing you learn about most of these billionaires is that they're really socially awkward people, like extremely. It's kind of interesting how very few of them
I would venture to say that a lot of them are probably on the spectrum.
Maybe. Well, you have to have that's like the thing with like Elon. It's like you could just tell that they kind of get like hooked into something, and then it's an obsession, and
they probably have a lot of childhood trauma from being picked on.
Fair enough. No,
I mean, Elon definitely, like, if you look at the pictures of him when he was younger, that is someone, he got shoved into lockers. There's no way he didn't get shoved into lockers.
And by the way, guys, I know that you may think that this is far-fetched, but trust me, it's not. There is a distinct possibility that Kamala Harris is going to run for governor of California. So just be ready for that one if that comes.
And let me tell you how much I will fight and go out of my way to help Bush Ware and do everything I can to help him.
But I really do believe that you guys have to start thinking about, if you really want out. And here's the thing. If you looked at it as, well, we're going to take over the Libertarian Party, if people decided that they just wanted to become a part of it, and there is the democratic process,
there's an infrastructure,
like you can build within it. It's not that big. However, it was big enough where Trump and RFK felt that they needed to go to their convention and speak. Who in the fuck is going to the Green Party convention?
Wait a minute, but wait a second. So if she were to run, I'm back on, you said she was thinking about like the idea of her running for governor of California. Didn't Trump get like 40% in California? Like,
just about, yeah.
Okay. That is, okay. Her running for governor there, honestly, anybody that would give her money to do that is a moron.
That's the other thing that's going to be
that's the
other thing that's going to be interesting with the Democratic Party now.
How are they going to?
Where's money coming from? They blew through that money.
They have to have corporate money bail them out. And so here's the problem, though, and this is something, and I've said it before. They take the corporate money, but then they sit there and ask for small dollar donations. How dare they? I find that so unbelievably disgusting. When I see Obama asking for money, I want to like jump out of my skin. Like, it's so infuriating. So I don't know how they raise money, because any normal person that sends money to the Democratic Party at this point is a moron.
Hey, I got my money. Now you're the one's got to deal with it.
I mean, I just do not, because if they were grassroots, then it makes sense for regular people to send them money. But if they're taking corporate money, you don't get to double dip. You don't get to double dip. So that's why I think, like, to me, the idea that people were giving small dollar donations to Democrats at this, but like, people, get off the crack pipe. Like,
as Dr. West would say.
That's what comes to mind when I think about it. But like, yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I would definitely recommend that we do look at other options, but I think the Democrats are just showing every day that they just will not relent.
No,
they're willing to basically go by the dustbin of history, because they could never, especially with Hillary and Debbie and Nancy, they could never admit that Bernie was right. They can't do it.
Well, they don't think he was.
They don't think he was, but
they feel very righteous in their indignation. Like Hillary Clinton and Debbie Wasserman Schultz are people that truly believe that they know better and that everyone else is just too stupid to know. And it's like that. But I mean, they're never going to change. They're not going to have a come to Jesus moment. They're not going to have anything. These are I'm telling you, it's like dealing with their overt narcissists that just constantly are with the Darvo with us, but they do it with Trump, you know, and it's just, they have nothing else.
They really don't, because they know that there is a yearning for left economic populism in this country, and the party is funded by the very people who will do absolutely everything possible to stop it from happening.
I need 2 more cards. So what do we have going up there? I'm working on maybe like a full house situation. I might even be able to get myself some sort of.
I'm tired.
I could work on a flush. I got a few different options here with War Criminal Poker. Just saying, I've got to mention. So guys, yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be playing War Criminal Poker here. And if you haven't gotten yourself some of these, you really should. War Criminal cards.
Yeah.
I recommend them. I highly recommend them. And the money goes to, it's a very small Palestinian fundraising thing, like a very grassroots. It's thewarcriminals.com. Get yourself some deck cards for, you know, they make really good stocking stuffers. I'm just saying.
Yippity dippity. We will have how many more shows together? I think 3. We've got 3 more.
And then you'll miss me. We won't be together for what we're not going to have. We're for the non-Festivus. I'm not having a Festivus.
Who's the Queen of Hearts, Jen?
The Queen of Hearts?
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, you need to understand how the legend works. So for people, this is how it works. So spades are White House war criminals. Diamonds are Israeli war criminals. Clubs are talking heads of genocide, and hearts are what they call water carriers for genocide. And then the jokers are betrayers of the Palestinian people. So if let's see, Queen of Hearts would be, Bernie is one of the jokers, sadly. So Queen of Hearts, let's see who we have as Queen of Hearts. Ursula von der Leyen, the EU
I thought
president.
It was Judge Judy for a second. That's
no, Ursula von der Leyen, what's her name? I can't pronounce it, but the president of the EU. Yeah. She's the Queen of Hearts. I guess that makes sense. Well, you've got, this is perfect that they made the Jack of Hearts the guy with the eye patch.
No, that's not even that's a different guy. That's Olaf Scholz.
Yes, the guy with the eye patch.
No, but you're thinking of
No, I'm thinking of the guy from Germany. I know who I'm thinking of.
Oh, okay. I thought you're thinking of the Congress.
No, I'm not thinking of Holly. Is that who you're thinking of? No, not Holly.
Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah, no, I was thinking of this guy. I know that these are specifically international people. I mean, like here's Trudeau is the 10 of Hearts. Yeah, we got some good ones in here. We got, look, Janet Yellen. We got her.
Yeah, she's still around.
Yeah, we got, Hakeem Jeffries.
Hope you guys enjoyed the show tonight. Even though this isn't everybody's cup of tea, we still got over 60 live stream viewers.
Colin, can you put that in the chat, in the whatever it is, or put it in the chat? Can you put it in the chat?
What am I putting?
Thewarcriminals.com. Somebody just asked.
What's the name of the website?
It's thewarcriminals.com. And this goes to a guest that Katie Halper had on her show. I cannot remember the man's name, but this was one of the things they were doing to help raise money. And I bought myself 4 packs because, fun for all. I gave one to my parents.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank all of you guys for being
guys,
here
if you're not subscribed, please hit the like button. And also if you would consider supporting the show and being a patron, it's really helpful. We've gotten a couple new patrons over the past week. So that's good. Great. I have one to add that I haven't, and I'm sorry if I can't remember the name right now. So I'm sorry if you're the new person and you're wondering.
Help me raise money to pay for my rent in the new apartment.
Nobody's helping you raise money for rent. That's what your job is for.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
I don't know how he's going to eat without being able to come into my house and take food out of the refrigerator. I don't know how he's going to function.
Oh, come on, Adam. You know you're going to do it one day.
Why? Why won't you subscribe? Why? Why do you hate us?
Yeah, but yet you're here and you've been here for the whole show, dude. What the hell's the problem?
We deserve money to be paid for our time. No, you're not paying me too. Okay, first of all, our favorite thing, honestly, is really subscribers, which is free. Okay, so really, that's what I'm really wanting you to do.
Did you at least hit the like button? You've made comments. Hit
the like button.
Can we get
He's made comments, so that's always nice. Thank you for participating,
Daryl. Hey, you know what? This is the thing.
You don't have to.
There is, with our conservatives,
what
you'll learn is that we're not offensive.
No,
we actually agree on most issues.
We play nice and we're not mean and we're not nasty. And here's the thing. And I honestly, I don't mind all the comments. The only time that I get upset is if people are being rude or disrespectful about our guests. Because even if you don't agree with them, these are people that we respect. So in order for you to play nice, you need to respect people and be respectful to people that we respect. Because it's our show. And we can make you go away if you're not nice. And it's just that simple. But
I have business.
He honestly, because he needs to get out of where he is, and it's a really good deal for him to go where he's going.
Yeah, I think
that's really what it is. It's a smart deal. But besides, I honestly, I don't know. How are you going to eat?
How are you going to
eat without my food service? How are you going to have toilet paper?
I'm gonna food prep. I'm gonna steal more toilet paper.
I don't know how you're gonna live.
Teresa, we always appreciate you, and any contributions are tremendously appreciated. But remember,
I'm so concerned for you.
Yeah.
Who's going to pick you up from the airport?
That's going to be tough. That's going to be tough.
What are you going to do?
So Pensacola Airport to where I live is almost an hour, so it's not exactly around the corner.
No, that sucks. I was thinking
yeah.
about that. It's going to be hard for you to get to visit your dad in Naples. It's hard.
Yeah, no, but like I said, I looked at the pros and the cons, and I thought this makes sense.
You've got to get out of the place.
Yeah. And
the idea of spending money to be down here, it's so outrageous and so not worth it. Like, it's definitely a smarter move, because what else would you do? Throw money at rent? I'm actually I'm reinvesting into my property. No, that's what I'm saying. I understand. Like, if you were to stay down here, what would you do? Like, you don't want to buy something down here. You're not going to throw money away at rent. Like, what else are you?
Well, you were actually pretty close, Travers. I will live on tuna sandwiches.
He doesn't do ham.
If you knew that, then you would have had the right answer.
No, he'll live on a nice combination of sludge and whatever he puts together.
Adam, I don't know how well you know us or know Jen, but Debbie
it's more him than me, I assure you.
Yes, Jen ran against Debbie for Congress. And Debbie is the embodiment.
And she's our congressperson.
Yes.
And she's been my congressperson for like almost 30 years at this point that she's been representing this district. And she's just doing it at her own enrichment. So the reason that we talk about her is that's our congressperson.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So it isn't personal.
That sounds delicious, Kat.
Okay, I have 2 soup options, and I bought a terrine for Thanksgiving this year. I bought a terrine. I've always wanted one. I now have a terrine. It's a Martha Stewart white pumpkin terrine, and so the choices are sweet potato. It's a sweet potato soup, or a pumpkin Gouda soup, which also sounds really good. Those are my choices.
Henry, I can't even think about food like that. I mean, honestly, I remember Roy Rogers.
Ham on hamburgers.
I do remember Roy Rogers.
Ham on hamburgers. No, I'm not with that.
Well, that's a first, and I appreciate your candor. Every time I yell, I sound like an incel.
I know. I know he sounds like that sometimes, and I can see that.
But I do agree that she isn't worth a dude on
He definitely has a real, that's his, I don't even know what you call it. Like the bane of his existence is Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Yeah, no,
That's his.
I just believe
nemesis.
that I do believe that she represents the very worst of us.
And the truth is, he's right when he says there was never any sort of reckoning for what happened to Bernie in 2016, and the fact that she is largely responsible.
And now look at where the party is.
See,
it's
that's
dying.
the thing.
It's dying.
She's
like literally
largely
dying.
responsible for the financial disaster that befell that party. She is the reason that that party went into financial distress and had to be bought out by Hillary Clinton. And as a result, the party is owned by Hillary Clinton. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz is somewhat like the apex of a lot of the things that we're seeing right now. She is a big part of the reason we had Trump in the first place. So there's a lot of like chickens coming home to roost that are a result of Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Now his beef with her is it's a little bit on the psycho side. I will agree. Mine, not as much. I would never. Jen. No, you know what I mean. Okay, I would never talk about her personally because I don't like to give her that.
No, she's just
I don't like to give her that acknowledgement.
Bernie was a great candidate in 2015, 2016. He just wasn't willing to fight the way he needed to.
And that's why I think it's upsetting to you the most is what she did to Bernie. And I think that's his biggest thing for him is anger about what she did to Bernie.
Debbie fucking Wasserman Schultz.
Exactly. But no, that is not like a focus. I'd rather forget about her.
Yeah.
I assure you.
And that's also the thing about Donna Brazile. Donna Brazile's nobody of what I consider to have integrity. She lies through her teeth for the Democratic Party establishment, but even she knows how bad she is.
You don't like socialism. I understand that.
Not everybody does.
I don't like capitalism.
That's why you need both.
No, we will never agree about this. I don't think you need that.
I'll tell you what we need. We need a bigger audience, but you guys are fantastic. And having you all here makes us happy.
So we have a lot of good stuff coming up.
We do. We've got a lot of good guests, and I will very likely go live on Sunday night for Pontificating with Pete. It does seem to be a good time.
It does.
To actually do it because it doesn't seem like any other shows
And I like to watch
going.
from the comfort of my bedroom.
It's so far away.
It's so far away, right out the door. Well, it will be when you're,
That's true.
You're going to need to get like, maybe you take this one. I don't know. You're going to need to take a camera and have a little tripod, but you need to have a setup so that it looks like somewhat professional. And you're going to need to get an actual, like a small light, like that one that I once loaned to you that you never used that I took back.
Adam, YouTube would be an example of free market capitalism if it wasn't heavily suppressed and oligarchic controlled, which is what it is. Let's be honest. This channel, everything that you see on this channel is 100% grassroots built.
We've been suppressed from the very beginning. Banned
early on for covering Julian Assange in a very, very provocative way. We did an Assange-a-thon.
Right, I did an Assange-a-thon.
That didn't go over very well.
No. We've done a lot of things that have gotten us put to the bottom of the to view list for people. We don't get, and we've grown at a much smaller pace.
Yes, but no knows the score. They understand.
Oh, for love of all that is holy.
Appreciate it, Daryl.
That was me. It's funny because he created generational change, but I did create Pontificating with Pete.
Bernie was not too little too late. He was too little when it needed to be
more.
A lot. That was the thing. And Bernie,
it needed to be the most.
Guys, you need to, if you haven't seen it, and here's what I will tell you and we could probably get a clip of this for Monday, Colin. I want to be able to show people the moment when Bernie Sanders became the candidate that could have been the president of the United States. It was the night after he won the Michigan primary in an absolute shocking fashion. And then the very next night, they had the debate down here in Miami. And Wasserman Schultz went to task trying to make sure that they stacked the room with all the Hillary people, and the left progressives were trying to get in there to support Bernie. I am telling you, I have never seen an ass kicking put on the opposing candidate like Bernie did that evening. He boxed Hillary into the corner so hard I thought she was going to quit.
And therein is a very brilliant point. Thank you, Base Chad Thunderjack.
That's a great point.
Which is, if social media was free market, YouTube wouldn't be the only functioning video platform.
Correct, because and again, I don't know what type of activity we get on Rumble, but clearly not anything like we're getting here.
That's because we're the smart people. No, it's, I think a lot of it is, well, and we are in our little bubble, right? Our bubble's just bigger than a lot of people. So we see it from a broader angle, but so it makes sense that Jordan and us would have a similar perspective.
Yeah.
We communicate. So it makes sense that we would, and we see a lot of the same bullshit.
Listen, and I've always been very honest. You know, Emma Vigeland, who I think is personally the reason why Sam Cedar has sunk as low as he has, is because I knew Emma Vigeland. I spent time with her and Jordan. Jordan and I have been friends for almost a decade. So a lot of people don't know that. And so I saw Emma in real time throw Jordan under the bus.
But a lot of people did.
A lot of people did.
That's my point. A lot of people did at that time with that TYT situation.
Correct. But when you do that to somebody, you're also showing your whole ass.
Oh, yeah.
You can't do that.
Well, but see, a lot of people are willing to get past stuff like that. And that's the thing. Like, we don't do that.
No.
Like, we don't work like that. And for me, like, if somebody shows me who they are, I believe them the very first time. No need to rehash.
That's why, listen, I respect the fact that we both respect the fact that John Nichols has a close relationship with Congressman Pocan. But Mark had agreed to come on our show, and then they did the old, that's Wasserman Schultz's, but can't go on that show.
But you know what? We should reach out again.
Yeah,
especially now that he has been somewhat verbal about some of these things.
He has. And the other thing you have to remember, guys,
we should invite him on now. And now I'm not, although I wasn't a candidate when we invited him before.
Well, this is the thing. It's like the left has to recognize that they can technically own the Democratic Party because you don't have to support them. You tell them that if you don't listen to us, you're never going to get support again. Like, to me, the Democratic Party in terms of presidential politics can never be supported again as long as superdelegates exist in the party. Now, you can have corrupt delegates, and that's going to happen in both parties. But in terms of the superdelegates, which is a safety valve, that cannot exist.
Wait, we have the video. We have the one on hold all the time. The Debbie video.
So if you want to know, Mr. Goodman, why we have to continually remind people of who Debbie Wasserman Schultz is, this is why.
Unpledged delegates exist really to make sure that party leaders and elected officials don't have to be in a position where they are running against grassroots activists.
They're kind of like you. They're kind of like you.
We have to have super delegates so that we make sure that the people in the party leadership don't have to be competing with the grassroots.
We definitely agree on that one, Kat.
Yeah, and I do love that I've got crossover. That's one of like the best compliments for me is that I see that I get crossover from some of the Tim Black chat. And I love that because I'm in there fairly regularly. I'm usually, yeah. He's got a lot more people. I mean, he's got a lot of people. What are you reading?
We'll agree to disagree, Adam. We will agree to disagree, Donald James. But that's the
about
good thing.
What? About the Electoral College?
No, about my opinion about Emma Vigeland. But at the end of the day, that's why
the opinions of Peter Hager do not reflect that of do not reflect that of the show or of me. I always give my disclaimer because I don't have a personal issue with any of these people. I don't. The content people, there are, but nobody that we've ever mentioned. Nobody.
Well, somebody wanted.
We have Dow who will not be named.
One of our supporters wanted me to critique the Midas Touch guys.
I don't know who that is.
You mean the Midas brothers, who are another product of nepotism?
I don't know who that
given
is.
A huge. They're just them, grifting, Pod Save America type people.
Oh,
basically those types.
Okay, yeah, I don't.
Just wealthy white dudes in LA.
Yeah, that's not
like the whole thing.
That's not my thing. I watch I'm very, very selective about what I watch. And I watch people that I know to be experts. I watch people. So like, I watch shows that host the people that I know what they're talking about. That's what I do. So it's whoever hosts them.
And Don, that's the beauty of discourse. I will never tell you that you're wrong, ever. I state my position. You state your position.
I have no
basic fundamental rights are the things that I will always fight tooth and nail on. And even if I was, let's say, in the GOP, there are just certain things where I agree with certain elements of what they're preaching. I agree with elements of what the actual working class left that perhaps is in the Democratic Party is preaching. But overall, until we deal with the fact that we are living in a corrupt system.
Yeah.
That's great. Yes, but no. We appreciate Sabby giving Jordan a platform. She's got a big one. Keep getting anybody who platforms Jordan is platforming real journalism that we desperately need. It's very hard to do what Jordan does.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to play our part as best we can.
Yeah.
You know. And so now we continue this fight. It's not pretty, but many bumpy roads ahead. We're grateful that you're here. Hope you're all doing well. I'll see you Sunday night.
See you guys.